They say the most dangerous place to stand is beside someone with nothing left to lose. Serena Hale learned that truth on the night her husband tried to destroy her in front of 100 witnesses. One moment she was the perfect political wife, smiling beneath crystal chandeliers. The next, she was drowning in accusations, cameras flashing, watching her entire life collapse on a marble floor. But Damian Mercer made one fatal mistake. He didn't know about the man in the shadows who'd been watching her for months, the one person powerful enough to burn his empire down in a single night. Before we begin, if you love intense crime romance with unexpected twists, stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Serena's story reaches. The Ashford Grand Hotel ballroom glittered like a kingdom built from diamonds and lies. Serena Hale stood beneath the vaulted ceiling, her emerald gown catching light from 3 massive chandeliers, and felt absolutely nothing. Not pride, not joy, not even the faint warmth of belonging. Just the hollow, practiced calm she'd perfected over 4 years of marriage. The kind that kept her spine straight and her smile flawless even when her husband's fingers dug into her waist hard enough to bruise. "Smile, darling," Damian Mercer murmured against her ear, his voice smooth as silk and cold as winter steel. "The cameras are watching," she smiled. Around them, 200 of the city's most powerful people moved through the gala like swans on still water. Senators, judges, real estate moguls, media executives, all of them draped in designer labels and million-dollar smiles. The annual Children's Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, the kind of night where fortunes were pledged, alliances were forged, and reputations were either cemented or shattered. Damian had been planning this night for months. Serena just didn't know why. "Mr. Mercer." A silver-haired woman in pearls glided toward them, champagne flute raised. "Your speech last week at the Economic Summit was absolutely brilliant. My husband and I were just saying you're exactly what this city needs." Damian's smile widened, his hand shifting from Serena's waist to her lower back, possessive, commanding, perfectly calibrated for the audience. "You're too kind, Margaret, though I have to give credit where it's due." He turned that smile on Serena, and she felt ice slide down her spine. "None of this would be possible without my extraordinary wife." The woman beamed. "You two are simply perfect together." "Aren't we?" Damian's thumb pressed against Serena's spine, a warning disguised as affection. "Serena has been absolutely invaluable to my work, handling the foundation's finances, managing our charitable partnerships. She's the heart of everything we do." Serena's smile never wavered. "It's been an honor to serve the community." The lie tasted like ash. Margaret raised her glass. "To Damian Mercer, our next mayor." Around them, others lifted their glasses, voices rising in agreement. Damian accepted the praise with perfect humility, his expression carefully calibrated between confidence and modesty. He was good at this. Better than good. At 38, he'd built a political career that seemed destined for greatness. City councilman at 30, economic advisor to the governor at 35, and now poised to announce his mayoral campaign before the year's end. Everyone loved Damian Mercer, everyone except the woman standing beside him. "If you'll excuse us," Damian said smoothly, guiding Serena away from Margaret's orbit. "I need to steal my wife for just a moment." They moved through the crowd, Damian's hand never leaving her back, his smile never faltering. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect power couple, beautiful, successful, untouchable. No one saw the way his fingers dug into her ribs. No one noticed the way Serena's breathing had gone shallow. No one understood that the woman in the emerald gown was barely holding herself together. "You're doing well," Damian said quietly as they reached the edge of the ballroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. "Keep it up for another hour. That's all I need." Serena stared at their reflection in the glass. Damian tall and commanding in his tailored tuxedo, herself slender and elegant beside him, both of them perfect pieces in a perfect picture. "What happens in an hour?" she asked softly. His smile sharpened. "You'll see." Fear curled through her chest, familiar and cold. She'd learned to recognize that tone, the particular edge it carried when Damian was planning something. But she'd also learned that asking questions only made things worse. So she smiled, nodded, and let him guide her back into the glittering crowd. Sut, 3 months earlier. The Red Lotus wasn't the kind of club most people knew existed. Tucked away in the industrial district, behind an unmarked door and down a flight of black marble stairs, it catered to a very specific clientele, people with money, power, and secrets they needed to keep buried. The music was low and hypnotic, the lighting dim enough to hide faces, and the staff trained to see nothing, hear nothing, remember nothing. Serena had been coming here every Tuesday night for 6 weeks. She sat at the far end of the bar, nursing a gin and tonic she wouldn't finish, watching the shadows move across the dance floor. The bruise on her left shoulder was hidden beneath a silk blouse. The one on her ribs, carefully covered by the designer blazer she'd worn like armor. Her wedding ring caught the low light, platinum and diamonds glittering like a shackle. "Another?" the bartender asked, already reaching for the gin. "No. Thank you." She didn't come here to drink. She came because it was the only place in the city where nobody knew her name, where she could sit in the dark for 2 hours and remember what it felt like to breathe without someone watching. Damien thought she spent Tuesday nights at book club. His security detail thought she was visiting her sister across town. The lies were getting easier. That should have terrified her. "You always sit alone." The voice came from her left, low, accented, carefully neutral. Serena turned and found herself looking at a man who seemed built from shadows and sharp angles. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and darker eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. His suit was expensive but understated, the kind of tailoring that whispered money without screaming it. She'd seen him here before, always in the back corner, always watching. "So do you," Serena replied evenly, his mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Fair point." He didn't ask to sit down, didn't introduce himself, just stood there in the dim light, studying her with an intensity that should have been unsettling but somehow wasn't. "You're nervous," he observed. "I'm fine." "You check your phone every 4 minutes. Your hands shake when you think no one's looking, and you never actually drink what you order." He tilted his head slightly. "That's not fine." Serena's pulse quickened. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed, "but I know fear when I see it." She should have walked away, should have left the club, gone home, pretended this conversation never happened. Instead, she heard herself ask, "And what do you see?" He was quiet for a long moment, those dark eyes never leaving hers. "A woman in a cage," he said finally, "pretending the bars are made of gold." Something inside Serena cracked, just a hairline fracture, barely visible, but enough to let the truth start bleeding through. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Lucian Drakov." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, calm, certain, like a man who'd never had to prove his power, sent a shiver down her spine. "I should go," Serena said, already sliding off the bar stool. "You come here every Tuesday," Lucian said quietly. "Same time, same seat, same drink you never finish." His gaze dropped to her left hand where her blazer had shifted just enough to reveal the edge of a bruise on her wrist. Same carefully hidden marks. Serena froze. "I'm not going to ask who did that to you," Lucian continued, his voice dangerously soft, "because I already know. But I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to answer honestly." She should have run, should have called security, made a scene, done anything except stand there meeting the eyes of a complete stranger who somehow saw through every lie she'd spent years perfecting. "What question?" she heard herself ask. Lucian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the scars on his knuckles, the absolute stillness in his expression that spoke of violence controlled but never forgotten. "Do you want out?" 2 words, 3 syllables. A question that cracked her world open. Serena opened her mouth, closed it, felt tears burning behind her eyes for the first time in months. Because the truth was, she'd stopped asking herself that question a long time ago. She'd stopped believing there was an out to want. Damien had made sure of that, slowly, methodically, over 4 years of carefully calibrated control. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "It never is." "You don't understand. My husband, Damien Mercer," Lucian interrupted calmly, "city councilman, economic advisor, likely mayoral candidate, beloved by the media, trusted by the wealthy, considered untouchable by anyone who matters." His expression didn't change. "I know exactly who your husband is." Serena's heart hammered. Then you know what he's capable of. Yes, Lucian said simply. Which is why I'm asking again. Do you want out? She stared at him, this stranger with scars on his hands and something unreadable in his eyes, and realized with sudden, terrible clarity that he was offering her something no one else had in years. A choice. Why do you care? She asked. Lucian was quiet for a moment. Because no one else does. The truth of it hit like a physical blow, because he was right. Everyone in Serena's life, her friends, her family, Damien's colleagues, even her own sister, looked at her and saw exactly what Damien wanted them to see. The perfect wife, the gracious hostess, the woman who had everything. No one saw the cage. If I said yes, Serena heard herself say, what would you do? Whatever needs to be done. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Lucian pulled a card from his pocket. Plain black, no name, just a phone number in silver print. You don't have to decide tonight, but when you're ready, if you're ready, call that number. Serena took the card, her fingers trembling. And if I'm not? Then I'll see you next Tuesday. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows at the back of the club, leaving Serena standing alone at the bar with a stranger's phone number and the first flicker of hope she'd felt in 4 years. She looked down at the card in her hand, then at her wedding ring, then at her own reflection in the mirror behind the bar. A woman in a cage, Lucian had said, pretending the bars are made of gold. Serena slipped the card into her purse, finished the drink she'd been nursing for an hour, and left the Red Lotus with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. She didn't call the number that night, but she didn't throw the card away either. Shit. Present day. The gala. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Damien's voice cut through the ballroom chatter, amplified by the sound system, commanding and warm. Conversations died. Heads turned. Serena felt her stomach drop as her husband stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room, microphone in hand, that familiar smile lighting up his face. This was it. Whatever he'd been planning, whatever he'd been building toward, it was happening now. First, I want to thank you all for being here tonight, Damien began, his voice carrying that perfect blend of gratitude and authority he'd spent years perfecting. Your generosity and commitment to the Children's Foundation never ceases to amaze me. Together, we've raised over $3 million this year alone. Applause rippled through the crowd. Serena stood frozen near the windows, champagne flute forgotten in her hand. But tonight, Damien continued, his expression shifting, subtle, barely noticeable, but Serena saw it. The way his smile tightened, the way his eyes went cold. Tonight, I need to address something far more serious than fundraising totals. Murmurs spread through the ballroom. Journalists who'd been casually documenting the event suddenly focused their cameras. As many of you know, Damien said, my wife Serena has been instrumental in managing the foundation's financial operations for the past 2 years. She's worked tirelessly, handling donations, managing accounts, ensuring every dollar goes where it's meant to go. Serena's pulse thundered. Around her, people were starting to stare. Which is why, Damien continued, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow, it breaks my heart to stand here tonight and reveal that my wife has been systematically stealing from the very children we've sworn to help. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, cameras swinging toward Serena like weapons. She stood paralyzed, champagne glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the marble floor, the sound lost beneath the sudden roar of voices. No, she whispered. No, that's not... I've spent the past 3 months working with forensic accountants, Damien said, his voice cutting through the chaos. What they've uncovered is devastating. Over $2 million funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts, all traced directly back to my wife. On the screens behind him, documents appeared. Bank statements, wire transfers, corporate filings, all of them bearing Serena's signature. Forged. All of it forged. But perfect. Absolutely perfect. I wanted to handle this privately, Damien continued, his expression a masterpiece of betrayed anguish. I begged Serena to come forward, to explain, to make this right, but she refused. She denied everything. And I realized that my duty to this city, to these children, had to come before my duty to my marriage. Serena tried to move, tried to speak, but her legs wouldn't work. The room was spinning, faces blurring together, all of them staring at her with shock, disgust, betrayal. The district attorney has been made aware of the situation, Damien said. As of tonight, a formal investigation is underway. And while it destroys me to say this, I can no longer stand beside someone who has betrayed not just me, but every child depending on our foundation's support. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. I'm filing for divorce. The words hit like a physical blow. Serena's vision tunneled, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This was it. This was what he'd been planning. Not just humiliation, total annihilation. In front of everyone who mattered, everyone who could help, everyone who might have believed her. Damien had just destroyed her life in under 5 minutes. No, Serena managed, her voice barely a whisper. This isn't... I didn't... But no one was listening. The crowd had already turned, whispers spreading like wildfire, cameras capturing her shock, her terror, her complete and utter devastation. She looked at Damien standing on that stage with manufactured tears in his eyes, and finally understood. He'd never loved her. He'd spent 4 years building this moment, setting up the accounts, forging her signature, creating a paper trail so perfect that even she couldn't prove her innocence. He'd isolated her, controlled her, broken her down piece by piece until she was too scared, too tired, too broken to fight back. And now he was going to walk away a hero. The wronged husband, the dedicated public servant, the man who'd sacrificed his marriage for justice. Serena's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the marble floor beside the shattered champagne glass, her emerald gown pooling around her like spilled paint, and felt what was left of her world finally, completely shatter. No one moved to help her. No one even looked at her. They were all watching Damien, listening to his carefully crafted confession, believing every perfect lie. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And then, get up. The voice was quiet, calm, familiar. Serena looked up through tears and found Lucian Drakov standing over her, one hand extended, his expression carved from stone. He'd come. She didn't know how, didn't know why, didn't understand what a man like him was doing at a charity gala full of politicians and socialites. But he was here. I can't, Serena whispered. Yes, Lucian said softly. You can. She stared at his hand. Scarred knuckles, steady fingers, absolutely no hesitation. And for the first time in 4 years, Serena Hale reached for help. Lucian pulled her to her feet in one smooth motion, his grip strong and certain. Around them, people were starting to notice, whispers shifting, cameras turning. Who is that? Where did he come from? Someone call security. But Lucian ignored them all. He kept his eyes on Serena, one hand steadying her elbow, his presence solid and immovable in the chaos. Can you walk? He asked quietly. She nodded, even though she wasn't sure. Good. Stay with me. He turned, still holding her arm, and faced the stage where Damien stood frozen, his perfect performance interrupted by a variable he clearly hadn't planned for. Mr. Drakov, Damien said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. This is a private event. I'll have to ask you to leave. Lucian said nothing, just stood there, silent and still, with Serena beside him and 200 witnesses watching. I said leave, Damien repeated, louder now. Security! 3 men in dark suits started moving through the crowd, but something in Lucian's expression made them hesitate. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats, didn't need to. The violence in him was so carefully controlled, so absolutely contained, that threatening to unleash it would have been redundant. You made a mistake, Lucian said finally, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Damien's jaw tightened. Excuse me? You spent 4 years building this moment, setting up the accounts, forging the signatures, creating a trail so perfect that even forensic accountants would believe it. Lucian's expression never changed. But you made one critical error. I have no idea what you're talking about. You assumed, Lucian continued calmly, that your wife was completely alone, that she had no one watching, no one who cared enough to look deeper. He paused. You were wrong. Damien's face went white, and then the screens behind him, the same screens that had just displayed Serena's supposed crimes, went black. For 3 seconds, the ballroom held its breath. Then the screens blazed back to life. But this time, they weren't showing Serena's forged documents. They were showing Damien's. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers to offshore corporations, tax documents that didn't match his public filings, and recordings, dozens of them, of Damien's voice discussing shell companies, bribery schemes, and plans to frame his wife for crimes he'd committed himself. What the hell? Damien lunged for the control panel, but the screens kept playing, cycling through evidence so damning, so thoroughly documented, that even his carefully cultivated image couldn't survive it. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Journalists surged forward, cameras blazing. Guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. Damien's political allies started backing away, distancing themselves from the scandal unfolding in real time. "Turn it off," Damien shouted. "Turn it off now!" But the screens kept playing. His voice filled the room, cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. The beauty of it is, everyone will believe her. She's already unstable, already isolated. By the time I'm done, she'll be facing federal charges, and I'll be running for mayor as the wronged husband who put justice above love. Someone in the crowd gasped. A woman started crying. Damien stood frozen on the stage, his perfect mask finally cracking. "This is fabricated," he said desperately. "Edited. Lies." "No," Lucian said quietly. "It's the truth." The main doors burst open. Federal agents streamed into the ballroom, badges out, moving with practiced precision. The lead agent, a severe woman with steel gray hair, walked straight to the stage. "Damien Mercer," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit multiple federal crimes." Damien's face drained of all color. "You can't. This is a mistake." "You have the right to remain silent." Around the ballroom, guests stood frozen, phones out, cameras recording the spectacular implosion of Damien Mercer's political career. Everything he'd built, the reputation, the influence, the carefully crafted image, collapsed in less than 10 minutes. And through it all, Lucian stood with Serena, his hand still on her arm, watching without expression as federal agents led her husband away in handcuffs. Serena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. "How?" she started. "Not here," Lucian said quietly. "Can you walk?" She nodded, even though she felt like she might shatter into pieces at any moment. Lucian guided her through the crowd, people partying like water, no one daring to stop them, and out through a side exit into the cold night air. The noise from the ballroom faded behind them, replaced by the distant sound of sirens and the harsh breathing of a woman who'd just watched her entire world turn inside out. "I don't understand," Serena whispered. "The evidence, the recordings, the federal agents, how did you—" 18 days, Lucian said calmly, leading her toward a black car waiting at the curb. That's how long it took to build the case against him. Forensic accountants, federal investigators, cooperation from 3 different agencies. Your husband was careful, but he wasn't as clever as he thought. Serena stared at him. "You did this. All of this." "You asked for out," Lucian said simply. "I gave it to you." Her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. She should have protested, should have insisted she could walk, but she was so tired, so completely exhausted, that all she could do was lean against his chest and finally let herself break. "It's over," Lucian said quietly, carrying her to the car. "You're safe now." Serena closed her eyes and felt the wedding ring still on her finger, platinum and diamonds, beautiful and poisonous. She twisted it off and let it fall. The ring hit the pavement with a soft clink and rolled away into the darkness. And for the first time in 4 years, Serena Hale felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Freedom. The car's interior smelled like leather and silence. Serena sat in the passenger seat, her emerald gown torn at the hem, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, staring at her bare ring finger like it belonged to someone else. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. The sirens had faded. The Ashford Grand Hotel was miles behind them. But she could still hear Damien's voice echoing in her head, could still see the moment his perfect mask cracked in front of 200 witnesses. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Lucian's hands were steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable in the dashboard light. Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now. Serena turned to look at him. This man who'd appeared in her life like a ghost, who'd somehow dismantled her husband's entire empire in 18 days, who'd carried her out of the wreckage without asking for anything in return. She realized with a jolt of clarity that felt almost painful that she knew absolutely nothing about him. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Really?" Lucian was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the road. "Someone who understands what it's like to be trapped." "That's not an answer either." "No," he agreed. "But it's true." The car turned down a narrow street lined with old brownstones, their windows dark, their facades weathered by decades of rain and neglect. This wasn't the city Serena knew, not the gleaming downtown corridors or the manicured suburbs where politicians lived. This was somewhere older, quieter, hidden beneath the surface like a secret the city kept from itself. Lucian pulled into an underground garage beneath one of the buildings, the door closing behind them with a heavy metallic thud. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, before turning to face her. "I'm going to ask you some questions," he said quietly, "and I need you to answer them honestly." Serena's pulse quickened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that will help me understand how deep this goes." His dark eyes met hers, unblinking. "Damien didn't just steal money and frame you for it. Men like him don't operate alone. There are partners, accomplices, people who benefited from keeping you silent and scared." The words hit like ice water. Because he was right. Damien had allies everywhere, politicians, lawyers, judges, media executives, people who owed him favors or shared his ambitions, or simply found him useful. "I don't know who they are," Serena whispered, "but you've seen them, heard things, noticed patterns." Lucian's voice remained calm, patient. "You've been living in his world for 4 years. You know more than you think." Serena closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. "I can't do this tonight. I can't." "Then we won't." But Lucian opened his door, came around to her side, and offered his hand. "Come on. You need rest." She let him help her out of the car, her legs unsteady, her entire body trembling with adrenaline crash. He led her to an elevator, then up 3 floors to a door that opened into a loft space. High ceilings, exposed brick, minimal furniture. It looked less like a home and more like a place someone stayed between wars. "There's a bedroom through there," Lucian said, nodding toward a door on the left. "Bathroom attached. You'll find clothes in the closet. They won't fit perfectly, but they're clean." Serena stared at him. "You had this ready." "I had contingencies ready." He moved to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, brought it to her. "Drink this, then sleep. We'll talk in the morning." "I don't understand." The words came out broken, desperate. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know?" Lucian looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. "Because I do know you, maybe not your history or your favorite color or how you take your coffee, but I know what you've survived, and I know what it costs to survive it." He turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Serena called. "Where are you going?" "I have things to take care of." "Will you come back?" The question hung in the air between them, fragile and exposed. Lucian paused in the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the hallway light. "Yes," he said simply. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click, leaving Serena alone in a stranger's apartment with a glass of water and the overwhelming realization that everything she'd known for 4 years had just been burned to ash. She stood there for a long time, still wearing the torn emerald gown, still feeling the phantom weight of her wedding ring on her finger. Then she drank the water, walked into the bedroom, and finally let herself cry. Serena woke to pale morning light streaming through unfamiliar windows. For 3 disorienting seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The gala, Damien's accusations, the screens lighting up with evidence, federal agents in the ballroom, Lucian carrying her through the wreckage. She sat up slowly, her body aching like she'd been in a fight. The emerald gown lay in a crumpled heap on the floor. She was wearing an oversized black t-shirt and sweatpants she didn't remember putting on. The room smelled faintly of coffee. Lucian was back. She found him in the kitchen, standing at the counter with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian. He glanced up when she entered, gestured toward a second cup of coffee waiting on the island, and continued his conversation. Serena picked up the cup, wrapped her hands around it for warmth, and studied him in daylight. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe 35, maybe less. The scars on his knuckles were more visible now, evidence of violence that had become routine. He wore dark jeans and a plain gray shirt, no jewelry, no watch, nothing that screamed wealth or power. But power radiated from him anyway, quiet and absolute. He finished the call, set his phone down, and looked at her. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I got hit by a train." "That's accurate." He poured himself more coffee. The story broke overnight. It's everywhere: news networks, social media, international coverage. Damien's political career is over. The Foundation's board has suspended all operations pending a full audit, and you're being referred to as a victim, not a criminal. Serena's hands tightened around her cup. They believe me? They believe the evidence, which is all that matters right now. But the case? The trial? There won't be a trial against you, Lucian interrupted calmly. The federal prosecutors have already dismissed all potential charges. The forensic analysis proved conclusively that every signature on those documents was forged. Your lawyer has a copy of the report. I don't have a lawyer. You do now. He slid a business card across the counter. Rachel Kincaid, best defense attorney in the city. She's expecting your call. Serena stared at the card, her mind struggling to process how quickly everything was moving. Yesterday, she'd been drowning. Today, she had a lawyer, evidence clearing her name, and a stranger who'd somehow orchestrated her salvation in under 3 weeks. I can't pay you for this, she said quietly. Lucian's expression didn't change. I'm not asking you to. Then what do you want? Right now? He met her eyes. I want you to drink that coffee, eat something, and then answer the questions I asked last night. About Damien's partners. Yes. Serena set down her cup, her appetite vanishing. What happens to them? That depends on what we find. Lucian's voice remained neutral, factual. If they actively participated in framing you or helped Damien hide his crimes, they'll face consequences. If they were simply useful idiots who believed his performance, they'll walk away embarrassed but intact. And you get to decide which is which. No. The evidence decides. He paused. But I need your help to find it. Serena looked down at her hands, the same hands that had signed charity checks and hosted dinner parties, and slowly, methodically, been used to build the cage around herself. She'd spent 4 years being powerless, voiceless, erased piece by piece until she barely existed outside Damien's narrative. Now someone was offering her the chance to fight back. Okay, she said softly. Ask your questions. Lucian pulled out a tablet, opened a file, and turned it toward her. Start with this. Damien's inner circle over the past 2 years. Anyone he met with regularly, called frequently, or mentioned in private conversations. Serena studied the list, recognizing names immediately. Mitchell Grantham, the district attorney who'd been preparing to charge her with fraud. Senator Patricia Harding, one of Damien's biggest political supporters. Marcus Wu, a real estate developer who donated heavily to the foundation. Vincent Caruso, Damien's campaign manager. These people aren't just associates, Serena said slowly. They're his power base. If they go down, half the city's political establishment goes with them. Good. She looked up sharply. Good? Corruption doesn't exist in isolation, Lucian said calmly. It's a network. Cut one thread, and the whole web weakens. He pulled up another file. Bank records, emails, phone logs. Grantham knew the charges against you were fabricated. He had access to the same forensic reports we used to clear you, and he buried them. Serena's stomach turned. He was going to prosecute me anyway. Yes. Why? Because Damien promised to back him for state attorney general. Lucian scrolled through more documents. Senator Harding received illegal campaign contributions funneled through the foundation's shell companies. Marcus Wu got zoning variances for 3 major development projects in exchange for political donations. And Vincent Caruso. He paused. Caruso helped forge some of the documents used against you. The room tilted. Serena gripped the counter, her breath coming short. They all knew. They all helped him. Not all of them, but enough. Lucian's expression remained neutral, clinical. Which is why I need you to tell me everything you remember. Conversations, meetings, anything unusual or out of place. I wasn't exactly included in his business dealings, but you were there. In the house, at the dinners, during the phone calls he thought you weren't listening to. Lucian leaned forward slightly. You're more observant than he gave you credit for. Trust that. Serena closed her eyes, forcing herself to think past the panic. 4 years of carefully cultivated blindness, of pretending not to notice, of making herself small and silent. But she'd been there. She'd heard things. 3 months ago, she said slowly, Damien had a meeting at the house, late at night. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I came back early from a dinner. She opened her eyes. It was Mitchell Grantham, Senator Harding, and someone I didn't recognize. A man with a European accent, German maybe. Lucian went very still. Describe him. 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. He spoke like someone used to being obeyed. Did you hear what they discussed? Serena hesitated, reaching for memories she'd tried to bury. They were arguing about timing. The man kept saying they needed to move the schedule up, that waiting was too risky. Damien disagreed, said rushing would draw attention. Did they say what they were moving? No, but Grantham mentioned elections, and the man said something about after the transfer clears. She frowned. I didn't understand it then. I just knew they all stopped talking when I walked in. Lucian was already typing on his tablet, cross-referencing dates and transactions. What else? A week later, Damien started pushing me to sign new foundation documents. He said they were standard updates, nothing important, but he was anxious about it, kept checking to make sure I'd signed them all. Do you remember what the documents said? Not specifically, but they changed the foundation's board structure, added new members. She closed her eyes, trying to visualize the pages. There was a clause about international partnerships, something about European charitable organizations. Lucian's fingers moved faster across the screen. That's when he set up the shell companies, used the foundation's legitimacy to create a money laundering network between here and Europe. He looked up. The man you saw was probably Klaus Reinhardt, German financier with ties to organized crime. He's been under investigation by Interpol for 6 years. Serena felt cold spread through her chest. Damien was working with criminals, and Damien is a criminal. Reinhardt just helped him expand his reach. Lucian pulled up a photograph, the same silver-haired man Serena remembered from that night. If we can prove the connection, we don't just take down Damien's local network. We expose an international fraud scheme worth hundreds of millions. And if we can't prove it, then Reinhardt walks away and sets up the same operation somewhere else. Lucian's expression hardened. I don't intend to let that happen. Serena stared at the photograph, at the face of a man who'd sat in her living room discussing elections and transfers while she'd pretended not to exist. What do you need from me? Access to Damien's home office, his files, his computer, anything he kept there. Lucian paused. I know that's asking a lot. I'll do it. He studied her carefully. You don't have to. We can find another way. No. Serena's voice was steady now, certain. He used me to build all of this. The least I can do is help tear it down. Something shifted in Lucian's expression, not quite approval, but close. When's the last time you were at the house? 2 days ago. I still have my key. She laughed bitterly. Damien probably hasn't thought to change the locks yet. He's in federal custody. He won't get the chance. Lucien checked his watch. His lawyers will have him out on bail by tonight, but right now the house is empty. If we're going to do this, it needs to be now. Serena's pulse quickened. The thought of going back to that house, the place where she'd spent 4 years being slowly erased, made her stomach turn. But beneath the fear was something else, something harder, anger. Let's go, she said. The Mercer estate sat behind iron gates and manicured hedges in the kind of neighborhood where silence was expensive and privacy was absolute. Serena had always hated it, the cold modern architecture, the sterile white walls, the surveillance cameras watching every corner like mechanical eyes. Damien had called it a sanctuary. She'd called it a prison. Now, pulling up to the gate in Lucian's black sedan, Serena felt her hands start to shake. "You okay?" Lucian asked quietly. "No." She took a breath. "But I'm doing it anyway." He nodded once, respect flickering across his features. "If anything feels wrong, if you need to leave, we leave. No questions." Serena punched in the gate code, half expecting it not to work. But the gate swung open smoothly, and they drove up the long driveway to the house that had never been a home. Inside, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Pristine furniture arranged with geometric precision. Abstract art on the walls that cost more than most people's cars. Not a single personal photograph. Not a single sign that real people had ever lived here. "His office is upstairs," Serena said, her voice sounding hollow in the empty foyer. They climbed the curved staircase to the second floor. Damien's office occupied the entire east wing, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, a massive desk of polished mahogany, filing cabinets that probably cost more than most people's mortgages. Lucian moved immediately to the desk, pulling on thin gloves before opening drawers. "Start with the filing cabinets. Look for anything dated within the last 6 months. Contracts, bank statements, correspondence." Serena hesitated at the threshold, old fears rising like ghosts. This was Damien's space, his sanctuary. She'd been forbidden from entering without permission, forbidden from touching his things, forbidden from existing here except to clean and organize under his supervision. "Serena," Lucian's voice cut through the spiral. "He can't hurt you anymore." The words landed like a lifeline. Serena stepped into the office, walked to the filing cabinets, and started pulling open drawers. For 20 minutes, they worked in focused silence. Lucian photographed documents with meticulous precision. Serena sorted through files, her hands steadier with each passing minute. The longer she stayed in this space, the more her fear transformed into something else. Fury, because these files told a story. Contracts with shell companies, correspondence with overseas accounts, meeting notes discussing problematic assets, which, she realized with cold clarity, meant her. Plans to neutralize opposition and leverage public sentiment. Damien hadn't just been stealing money, he'd been building an empire, and she'd been the cornerstone he planned to sacrifice. "Serena," Lucian's voice was tight. "Come look at this." She crossed to the desk where he'd opened Damien's laptop. Bypassed the password somehow, she didn't ask how. On the screen was an email chain between Damien and Klaus Reinhardt. "The wife is becoming a liability. She's asking questions about the transfers. Then handle it. We can't afford loose ends this close to the election. I'm working on it. The frame is almost complete. Once the charges drop, she'll be too destroyed to be credible. Make it public. Make it brutal. Send a message." Serena's vision blurred. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knees threatening to give out. "He planned this from the beginning," she whispered. "The isolation, the control, all of it was just building toward this moment." "Yes," Lucian's jaw was tight, "which means we need to make sure his plan backfires spectacularly." He plugged a small drive into the laptop, started downloading files. Serena watched the progress bar crawl across the screen and felt something inside her finally, irrevocably break free. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was evidence. "There's more," Lucian said quietly, pulling up another folder. "Offshore accounts in your name, properties purchased with forged signatures, investment portfolios you never authorized." He turned the screen toward her. "He didn't just frame you for theft. He built a financial profile so convincing that even sophisticated investigators would have believed it." Serena stared at the documents, her name, her signature, her identity weaponized against her with surgical precision. "How do we fight this?" she asked. "We already are." Lucian ejected the drive, slipped it into his pocket. "Every file we've copied, every email we've documented, it's all evidence, not just of his crimes, but of his intent. Premeditation, conspiracy. Will it be enough? To destroy him?" Lucian's expression went cold. "Yes. To take down everyone who helped him." He paused. "That depends on how far you're willing to go." Serena met his eyes. "All the way." A slight smile crossed his face, brief, barely there, but genuine. "Good." They spent another hour methodically stripping the office of anything useful. Financial records, correspondence, meeting notes. Lucian worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who understood exactly what prosecutors would need to build an airtight case. Serena helped where she could, but mostly she just let herself feel the anger. Let it burn through the fear, the shame, the exhausting weight of 4 years spent disappearing. She wasn't disappearing anymore. "We're done here," Lucian finally said, closing the last cabinet. "Let's go." They were halfway down the stairs when the front door opened. Serena froze. Damien stood in the doorway, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, his carefully cultivated mask completely shattered. His lawyer, a nervous man in wire-rimmed glasses, hovered behind him. "Mr. Mercer," the lawyer said urgently, "you really shouldn't be—" "Get out!" Damien said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. His eyes locked on Serena. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" "It's my house too," Serena said quietly, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Legally, at least until the divorce you so publicly announced is finalized. You have no right. I have every right." She descended the last 3 steps, standing in the foyer while Lucian moved to her side like a shadow. "I lived here for 4 years, signed your papers, hosted your dinners, played the perfect wife while you built my cage." Damien's face went white, then red. "You ruined everything. Do you understand that? Everything I built." "You built it on fraud," Serena interrupted. "On corruption and lies and crimes that are going to send you to prison for the next 20 years. You can't prove—" "We already did." Lucian's voice cut through the rage like a blade. "Every account, every transfer, every conversation with Reinhardt, it's all documented." Damien's eyes swung to Lucian, hatred burning there. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Yes," Lucian said calmly, "I do. You're a small-time politician with delusions of grandeur who made the mistake of thinking you were untouchable." He pulled the drive from his pocket, held it up. "This contains enough evidence to dismantle your entire network. Your partners, your financiers, everyone who helped you. You can't—" "I already have." Lucian slipped the drive back into his pocket. "Federal prosecutors will have copies by tonight, Interpol by tomorrow morning. And Klaus Reinhardt?" He smiled, cold and sharp. "He's already in custody, in Berlin." The color drained from Damien's face. "No," he whispered. "Yes." Lucian's expression never changed. "It's over, Mercer. All of it." For a long moment, no one moved. Damien stood frozen in his own doorway, his perfect life crumbling around him, his carefully constructed empire reduced to evidence and testimony. Then his eyes found Serena again. "This is your fault," he said, his voice breaking. "All of it. If you just stayed quiet, if you just done what you were supposed to." "I was supposed to disappear," Serena said quietly. "That was always your plan. Make me invisible, make me disposable, and then make me the villain when you needed someone to blame." She met his eyes. "But I didn't disappear, Damien, and now everyone knows what you really are." Something cracked in his expression, rage giving way to desperation. He lunged forward, hand reaching for her. Lucian moved faster. One moment Damien was rushing toward Serena. The next he was slammed against the wall, Lucian's forearm across his throat, the violence so controlled and precise it looked almost casual. "Don't," Lucian said quietly, his voice carrying more threat in one word than most people managed in entire speeches. Damien struggled, gasping. His lawyer started forward, then thought better of it. "You're going to leave," Lucian continued, his tone conversational. "You're going to go back to wherever your lawyer tells you to go, and you're going to wait for the federal agents who are already on their way here. And you're never going to come near her again. Are we clear?" Damien tried to speak, couldn't. Lucian eased the pressure just enough. "Are we clear?" "Yes," Damien choked out. Lucian released him, stepped back, and positioned himself between Damien and Serena. "Good." Damien collapsed against the wall, coughing, his perfect image destroyed as thoroughly as his career. His lawyer grabbed his arm, started pulling him toward the door. "Come on, Mr. Mercer. We need to leave before—" Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Damien's face went gray. He looked at Serena one last time, hatred and desperation and something that might have been genuine grief twisting his features. "I loved you," he said hoarsely. Serena felt nothing, just empty, exhausted relief. No, she said. You didn't. Then she turned and walked out of the house, Lucian beside her, leaving Damian Mercer alone in the sanctuary that had become his tomb. Federal agents were pulling into the driveway as Lucian and Serena drove away from the Mercer estate. In the rearview mirror, she watched them swarm the house. Black SUVs, suited figures moving with practiced efficiency, Damian's lawyer gesturing frantically, while Damian himself stood motionless on the front steps like a man watching his own execution. Serena turned away and stared at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore. You okay? Lucian asked, his eyes on the road. I don't know. The truth felt strange on her tongue. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction. But I just feel empty? Yes. Lucian navigated through side streets, avoiding the main roads where news vans were probably already gathering. That's normal. You spent 4 years being afraid. Now the threat's gone, and your body doesn't know what to do with the space it left behind. Serena looked at him sharply. You sound like you're speaking from experience. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Everyone who's survived something carries scars. The question is what you do with them. What did you do with yours? For a long moment he didn't answer, then quietly, I made sure no one else got the same ones. The weight of those words settled between them. Serena studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the controlled stillness in his posture, the scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence made routine. Lucian Dreykov wasn't just a man who understood trauma. He was a man who'd weaponized his own survival into something sharp enough to cut through other people's cages. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere you can breathe for a few hours before the media circus starts. It's already started, hasn't it? Yes, but you don't have to face it alone. Serena's phone, still tucked in the pocket of the jacket Lucian had given her, buzzed incessantly. She'd been ignoring it all morning, but curiosity finally won. She pulled it out and found 73 missed calls, 214 text messages, and voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize. Her sister Emma's name appeared 15 times. Serena's chest tightened. She'd barely spoken to Emma in 6 months. Damian had made sure of that, slowly cutting her off from family until phone calls felt like betrayals, and visits became impossible. I should call her back, Serena said quietly. Do you want to? The question stopped her, because the truth was, she didn't know. Emma had believed Damian's performance, had questioned Serena's judgment, had slowly absorbed the narrative that her sister was unstable, unreliable, possibly unwell. The last time they'd spoken, Emma had suggested therapy, had used words like paranoid and self-sabotaging, had looked at Serena like she was broken. Not yet, Serena said finally, putting the phone away. Lucian nodded once, didn't push. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the underground garage of a different building, older than the loft, quieter, tucked into a neighborhood where money whispered instead of shouted. The apartment upstairs was smaller than the first safe house, warmer somehow. Exposed brick walls, worn leather furniture, bookshelves crammed with volumes in multiple languages. A kitchen that looked actually used. Windows overlooking a small courtyard where early morning light filtered through iron railings. Is this yours? Serena asked. One of several. Lucian moved to the kitchen, started making coffee with the kind of efficiency that suggested muscle memory. I keep places around the city, different purposes. And this one's purpose is what? Hiding people who need to disappear for a while. He glanced at her. Or giving them space to figure out who they are when they're not being watched. Serena sank onto the leather couch, exhaustion finally catching up with her. How many people have you hidden here? You're the first in 2 years. And before that? Lucian was quiet for a moment, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. A journalist who uncovered corruption in the mayor's office. A witness in a human trafficking case. A woman whose ex-husband had connections in the police department. He brought both mugs to the living room, handed one to Serena. People who needed someone willing to operate outside the system to keep them alive. Is that what you do? Operate outside the system? Sometimes the system is the problem. He settled into a chair across from her, his movements controlled, economical. Laws are useful until they're weaponized by people who know how to manipulate them. Then you need someone who understands the rules well enough to break them strategically. Serena wrapped her hands around the warm mug. You're talking about yourself. I'm talking about necessity. That's not an answer. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're getting better at calling me on that. I've had good practice being lied to. I'm learning to recognize evasion. She met his eyes. Who are you, Lucian? Really? Not the philosophical version. The actual truth. He studied her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't see. Then he set down his coffee and leaned back in the chair, his expression carefully neutral. I was born in Moscow, he said quietly. My father worked for people who operated in the spaces between legal and criminal, import-export businesses that moved more than merchandise, financial services that cleaned money for oligarchs. He was good at it, too good. Made the mistake of thinking competence meant protection. Serena's pulse quickened. What happened? He stole from the wrong people, thought he could disappear with enough money to start over somewhere safe. Lucian's voice remained flat, factual. He was wrong. They found him in Berlin when I was 12, made an example that ensured no one else would try the same thing. And you? I survived, got passed around to relatives who didn't want me, learned to be useful enough that people let me stay. By 16, I was running errands for the same organizations my father had worked for. By 20, I'd built enough connections to operate independently. He paused. I came to this country 8 years ago, started over, built something that couldn't be taken away. What did you build? Solutions, Lucian said simply. For people who can't solve their own problems through conventional channels. Sometimes that means finding evidence. Sometimes it means relocating witnesses. Sometimes, he met her eyes, sometimes it means dismantling the empires of men who think they're untouchable. Serena felt something shift in her understanding. You did this before. What you did for me. You've done it for other people. Yes. How many? Enough to know the patterns. Enough to recognize the signs. His expression hardened slightly. Men like Damien follow predictable templates. Isolation, control, gaslighting, financial abuse. Then the final move, public destruction designed to ensure the victim can never recover or retaliate. But you stop them. When I can. Lucian's voice carried an edge of something that might have been regret. I can't save everyone. Some people don't want to be saved. Some wait too long. Some are too scared to take the risk. And some? Serena prompted. Some are brave enough to reach for help when it's offered. The words landed like a challenge and a compliment simultaneously. Serena looked down at her coffee, her reflection wavering on the dark surface. I didn't feel brave, she said quietly, that night at the Red Lotus. I felt desperate. Desperation and bravery aren't mutually exclusive. Lucian stood, moved to the window. You were terrified, but you still took my card. You still made the choice to call. That's courage, even if it doesn't feel like it. I didn't call for weeks, but you called eventually. That's what mattered. Serena remembered that night, 3 weeks after their first conversation, after another one of Damien's controlled rages, after signing documents she didn't understand while his hand rested on her shoulder like a threat. She'd locked herself in the bathroom, stared at Lucian's card for 20 minutes, and finally dialed the number with shaking fingers. He'd answered on the second ring. I need help, she'd whispered. I know, he'd said. Tell me everything. And she had. 2 hours on the phone, Damien asleep in their bed, Serena sitting on the cold bathroom tile, and finally speaking the truth out loud. The abuse, the control, the forged signatures she'd only started to recognize, the growing certainty that Damien was building towards something catastrophic. Lucian had listened without interrupting. Then he'd asked one question. How much time do we have? I don't know, Serena had admitted, but not long. He's getting anxious. Something's coming. Then we work fast. No hesitation, no doubt. Just immediate, absolute commitment. I'll need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Starting tomorrow, I need you to document everything. And she had. For 18 days, Serena had become a spy in her own marriage, photographing documents when Damien left his office unlocked, recording conversations on her phone, memorizing details from meetings she wasn't supposed to overhear. All of it sent to Lucian through encrypted channels he'd set up. She'd been terrified every single day, but she'd done it anyway. You took a massive risk, Lucian said now, as if reading her thoughts. Documenting evidence while living with someone who would have destroyed you if he'd found out. That's not desperation. That's strategic courage. It felt like survival. Sometimes they're the same thing. He turned from the window to face her. The question is what comes next. Survival's over. Now you get to decide who you become after. Serena's throat tightened. I don't know how to do that. No one does. You just start making choices and see what happens. What kind of choices? Lucian moved back to his chair, settled into it with that same controlled stillness. The federal case against Damien is solid. He'll be convicted. But the people who helped him, Grantham, Senator Harding, Marcus Wu, Vincent Caruso, they're going to lawyer up, claim ignorance, try to distance themselves from the fallout. Can they? Some of them. The evidence against Grantham and Caruso is strong enough to guarantee indictments. Harding and Wu are more insulated. They'll probably survive with damaged reputations but no criminal charges. He paused. Unless we push harder. Serena's pulse quickened. What does pushing harder look like? Testimony. You were there for meetings, dinners, conversations where they discussed strategy. Your account of what you saw and heard could be the difference between political embarrassment and criminal prosecution. They'll destroy me, Serena said automatically. Their lawyers will paint me as unstable, vindictive, a scorned wife making things up for revenge. They'll try, Lucian agreed. But you'll have something they don't, credibility backed by documented evidence. And you'll have Rachel Kincaid, who's never lost a case involving witness testimony. Still, you don't have to decide now, Lucian interrupted gently. The prosecutors will want your statement eventually, but you have time to think about how public you want to be. Serena looked at him, this man who'd orchestrated her salvation and was now offering her the choice to go further. What would you do? I'm not you. That's not an answer. His mouth curved slightly. No, it's not. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. If it were me, I'd burn them all. Every single person who helped Damien build his empire, who knew what he was doing and chose profit over morality. I'd make sure their names were attached to the scandal so thoroughly that they'd never recover. That's revenge. That's justice. Lucian's expression hardened. Revenge is pointless rage. Justice is strategic accountability. What Damien did to you wasn't isolated cruelty. It was enabled by a network of powerful people who benefited from your silence and suffering. They should face consequences. Serena felt something fierce and unfamiliar rising in her chest. They should. But it's your choice, Lucian said quietly. Not mine. Not the prosecutor's. Yours. You get to decide if you want to testify, if you want to speak publicly, if you want to become the face of this case, or stay anonymous and let the evidence speak for itself. And if I choose to stay silent, then you stay silent. You've given enough already. No one has the right to demand more. The freedom in those words was almost overwhelming. For 4 years, Serena had lived without choices. Every decision filtered through Damien's approval, every action calculated to avoid his anger. Now someone was handing her autonomy like a gift and trusting her to use it wisely. I need time, she said. You have it. Her phone buzzed again. Serena glanced at the screen. Emma, calling for the 16th time. She hesitated, then answered. Serena? Emma's voice was sharp with panic. Oh, thank the heavens. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? Where are you? The news is saying, I'm fine, Serena interrupted. Fine? You're fine? Damien's been arrested? They're saying he framed you for fraud. The whole foundation is being investigated. How can you possibly be fine? Because it's over, Serena said quietly. Everything he did to me, everything he was planning, it's done. Emma was silent for a beat. I don't understand. You were at the gala when he said those things about you. He lied. Serena's voice was steady now, certain. About all of it. The theft, the instability, everything. He spent 4 years setting me up to take the fall for his crimes. But you never said anything. You never told me, because you wouldn't have believed me. The truth tasted bitter, but necessary. You thought I was paranoid, self-sabotaging, remember? Another silence, heavier this time. Serena, It's okay, Serena said, though it wasn't, not yet. You didn't know. Damien made sure no one knew. Where are you? Emma asked. I can come get you, bring you to my place. I'm safe where I am. With who? Serena glanced at Lucian, who'd moved back to the window, giving her privacy while remaining present. With someone who actually helped when it mattered. Emma's voice tightened. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. Serena softened slightly. I'm not trying to hurt you, Em. I just need space right now, time to figure out what comes next. Will you at least let me know you're okay? Check in so I don't worry? I'll text you later. Promise? Promise. Serena ended the call and set the phone down with more force than necessary. Lucian turned from the window, one eyebrow raised. That looked difficult, he observed. She meant well. Serena rubbed her face. She always means well, but meaning well and actually showing up are different things. Yes, they are. Did you have family who meant well but didn't show up? Lucian was quiet for a moment. Everyone I had failed in their own way. Some through absence, some through active harm. Eventually I stopped expecting anything different. That sounds lonely. It was practical. Serena studied him. This man who'd saved her life without knowing her, who'd assembled evidence and dismantled empires and carried her out of wreckage without asking for gratitude or payment or anything except her willingness to fight back. Why did you really help me? She asked. The truth this time. Not philosophy or deflection. Lucian met her eyes, something shifting behind his carefully controlled expression. Because I saw you sitting alone in that club, trying so hard to disappear, and I recognized what that meant. Someone was breaking you piece by piece, and no one around you noticed or cared. He paused. I know what that's like, and I decided a long time ago that if I could stop it from happening to someone else, I would. Even if it meant going up against powerful people, especially then. Powerful people rely on everyone being too scared to challenge them. Break that assumption and they crumble faster than they expect. Is that what happened with Damien? A cold smile crossed Lucian's face. Damien built his empire on the belief that his reputation and connections made him bulletproof. Once I proved they didn't, everything else fell apart easily. It didn't seem easy. The best operations never do. That's how you know they're done right. Serena stood, moved to the window beside him. Outside, the city continued its morning routine. People heading to work, delivery trucks making rounds, life proceeding normally while her entire existence had been turned inside out. What happens now? She asked. Short term? You rest. Eat. Give your body time to stop running on adrenaline. Lucian glanced at her. Long term? You make decisions about testimony, about your future, about what kind of life you want to build. You? I make sure the people who help Damien don't escape justice. Then I move on to the next problem. Just like that? You save someone's life and then move on. That's the job. Serena turned to face him fully. Is that really all this is to you? A job? Lucian was quiet for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Then carefully, no. It stopped being just a job the moment you called that number. But what it becomes after this, he paused. That depends on what you want. The admission hung between them, weighted with possibilities Serena wasn't ready to examine. Her marriage had ended less than 48 hours ago. Her husband was in federal custody. Her life was evidence in a criminal investigation. She had no business thinking about what Lucian meant, what he wanted, what the careful distance in his voice was protecting them both from. But she thought about it anyway. I don't know what I want, she said honestly. That's okay. You don't have to. Her phone buzzed again. Not Emma this time, but an unknown number. Serena frowned, answered cautiously. Ms. Hale? A woman's voice, professional and warm. This is Rachel Kincaid. Lucian asked me to reach out. Serena glanced at Lucian, who nodded once. Yes, hello. I wanted to touch base about representation and discuss next steps. I know this is overwhelming, but I promise we'll handle everything strategically. You're not alone in this. Thank you. Serena's voice came out steadier than she felt. What do I need to do? For now, nothing. Rest. Process. I'll handle the media inquiries and coordinate with federal prosecutors. We'll meet tomorrow morning to go over everything in detail, but today you focus on taking care of yourself. Can you do that? The question was gentle but firm, the kind of compassionate authority Serena hadn't experienced in years. I can try, she said. Good. That's all I ask. I'll call you tonight to confirm tomorrow's meeting time. Until then, if you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me directly. Okay? Okay? One more thing. The media is going to be relentless for the next few days. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. Don't read the comments online. Don't engage with journalists who show up wherever you're staying. Let me handle all of that. I will. Excellent. I'll speak to you tonight, Ms. Hale. The call ended. Serena looked at Lucian. She sounds competent. She's the best. He checked his watch. I need to make a few calls. You should eat something. Try to sleep. There's food in the kitchen, clothes in the bedroom if you want to change. Where will you be? Making sure Klaus Reinhardt's arrest in Berlin leads to extradition here, and confirming that Senator Harding's financial records are being subpoenaed. He paused at the doorway. If you need me, I'll be in the next room. Then he was gone, leaving Serena alone in the quiet apartment with sunshine streaming through the windows and the overwhelming realization that for the first time in 4 years, she was safe. She sank back onto the couch, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. Her body felt heavy, her mind scattered, her emotions tangled into something she didn't have the energy to untangle. But beneath it all was something new, something that felt almost like hope. Serena closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The possibility of a future that belonged to her, the promise of choices made freely, the chance to become someone other than Damian Mercer's victim or his weapon. She didn't know who that person would be yet, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wanted to find out. Hours later, Serena woke to the smell of food and the sound of Lucian moving quietly through the kitchen. Sunset light slanted through the windows, painting everything gold and amber. She'd slept the entire day without meaning to, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. You're awake, Lucian said, not turning from the stove. Good timing. Food's almost ready. Serena sat up slowly, disoriented. What time is it? Almost 7. You needed the rest. She stood, moved to the kitchen, watched him cook with the same controlled efficiency he applied to everything else. Pasta, vegetables, something that smelled like garlic and herbs. You didn't have to cook, she said. You need to eat. He plated 2 portions, brought them to the small dining table. Sit. She obeyed, too tired to argue. The food was simple, but good, real, homemade, the kind of meal someone makes when they actually care about nourishment instead of performance. They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes before Lucian spoke. Rachel called while you were sleeping. The meeting's set for 10 tomorrow morning at her office. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I know. He met her eyes. But I'm going to anyway. Serena set down her fork. Why? Because you shouldn't have to walk into that meeting alone. And because I want to make sure you understand every option before you make any decisions. About testimony. About everything. Lucian leaned back in his chair. The prosecutors are going to push for your cooperation. Rachel will make sure they don't push too hard, but you need to be prepared for pressure. What kind of pressure? The emotional kind. They'll talk about justice, about helping other victims, about your civic duty to hold powerful people accountable. His expression hardened, all of which is true. But it's also manipulation designed to make you feel obligated to testify regardless of personal cost. And you think I shouldn't? I think you should do whatever serves your healing, not their case. Lucian's voice was firm. If testifying helps you process what happened and gives you closure, then do it. If it re-traumatizes you and interferes with your recovery, then don't. The federal case is strong enough without you. Your testimony would strengthen it, but it's not essential. Serena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. You really believe that? Yes. Even though getting Harding and Wu would require my testimony? Even then. Lucian's gaze never wavered. Your well-being matters more than their convictions. I can find other ways to hold them accountable if necessary. Legal ways. A slight smile. Sometimes. Serena found herself smiling back despite everything. You're dangerous. Yes, he agreed calmly, but only to people who deserve it. They finished eating in silence that felt less heavy than before. Serena helped clean up, moving through the unfamiliar kitchen with growing comfort. It felt strange, domestic almost, being here with Lucian after everything that had happened. "Can I ask you something?" she said, drying the last plate. "Always. Do you ever regret it? Doing what you do? Living the way you live?" Lucian considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I regret the necessity, the fact that people like me need to exist because systems fail. But the work itself?" He shook his head. "No. Knowing I can make a difference when conventional channels can't, that's purpose. That matters. Even when it's dangerous? Especially then. Safe choices are easy. Meaningful ones rarely are." Serena set down the towel, turned to face him fully. "What you did for me, gathering evidence, coordinating with federal agencies, exposing Damien's entire network, that was more than meaningful. That was—" Her voice caught. "That was everything." Lucian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You made it possible. All I did was provide tools and strategy. You're the one who had the courage to use them. I was terrified the entire time. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." He moved closer, stopped just within arm's reach. "You survived 4 years of systematic abuse, documented evidence while living with your abuser, stood up in front of witnesses when everything collapsed. That's not terror winning, that's strength." Serena felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I don't feel strong." "No one ever does while they're in it. Strength is only visible in hindsight." The distance between them felt charged with something neither acknowledged. Serena knew she should step back, create space, remember that her divorce wasn't even filed yet, and her emotions were a disaster, and getting involved with anyone, especially the man who'd saved her, was a terrible idea. But she didn't move. Neither did Lucian. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult," he said quietly. "Rachel will walk you through everything, but there will be decisions to make, questions to answer. If at any point it becomes too much—" "You'll be there," Serena finished. "Yes." "Promise?" Something shifted in his eyes. "I promise." The moment stretched, fragile and strange, until Serena finally stepped back and Lucian led her. "I should sleep," she said. "Real sleep, in an actual bed." "Good idea." Lucian moved toward the living room. "I'll be out here if you need anything." "You're not sleeping." "I'll sleep later." Serena wanted to argue, to point out that he'd been awake for at least 36 hours, that he needed rest as much as she did, but the determined set of his shoulders told her it would be pointless. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything." Lucian looked at her, expression unreadable. "You don't have to keep thanking me." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." He almost smiled. "Get some rest, Serena." She did. And for the first time in 4 years, she slept without nightmares. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, and the distant sound of traffic that didn't belong to the neighborhood Serena had called home for 4 years. She woke slowly, disoriented for the span of 3 heartbeats before memory crashed back. Damien's arrest, the federal evidence, Lucian's steady presence through the wreckage. She was free. The thought still felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Serena found Lucian in the kitchen, already dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal shirt, 2 cups of coffee waiting on the counter. He looked like he'd slept maybe 3 hours at most, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "Rachel's office is across town," he said without preamble. "We should leave in 30 minutes to avoid traffic." Serena nodded, accepted the coffee, let the warmth ground her. "What should I expect?" "Questions. Lots of them. Rachel will want to understand the full scope of what happened so she can build the strongest possible defense against any civil suits Damien's lawyers might attempt." Lucian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "The federal prosecutors will probably be there too. They'll want to discuss testimony." "Already?" "The case is moving fast. Klaus Reinhardt's arrest opened up international channels, and the evidence we provided gave them enough to move immediately. They want to capitalize on momentum before Damien's legal team can mount an effective defense." Serena's stomach tightened. "And if I say no to testifying?" "Then you say no. Rachel will make sure they respect that." His expression softened slightly. "But they will try to convince you otherwise. Be ready for that." She was as ready as she'd ever be, which was to say, not ready at all. But 25 minutes later, Serena found herself in Lucian's car again, watching the city blur past while her pulse hammered against her ribs. Rachel Kincaid's office occupied the top floor of a steel and glass building downtown. The reception area was minimalist elegance, expensive furniture, modern art, the kind of space designed to intimidate and reassure simultaneously. A young woman at the desk looked up as they entered. "Ms. Hale? Ms. Kincaid is expecting you. Conference room 2. Lucian's hand touched Serena's elbow briefly, steadying, not controlling, and they walked down a corridor lined with windows overlooking the city. Through one of the glass walls, Serena could see the Ashford Grand Hotel in the distance, its facade gleaming in morning sunlight like it hadn't been the site of her public destruction 48 hours ago. Rachel Kincaid stood when they entered the conference room. She was tall, 50s, with steel gray hair cut sharp and precise, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But her handshake was warm, and her eyes held genuine compassion. "Miss Hale, thank you for coming." She gestured to the chairs around a polished table. "Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Water would be good," Serena managed. Rachel poured from a pitcher on the sideboard, handed Serena a glass, then settled into her own chair with the kind of controlled authority that came from decades of high-stakes litigation. "First things first," Rachel said. "How are you holding up?" The question was so direct, so unexpectedly personal, that Serena felt something crack in her carefully maintained composure. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything feels surreal." "That's completely normal. You've experienced significant trauma, and now you're dealing with the aftermath while the whole city watches. That's not easy." Rachel opened a leather portfolio, pulled out several documents. "My job is to make this process as manageable as possible while protecting your interests. That means being very clear about what's happening, what your options are, and what I recommend. Sound good?" Serena nodded. "Excellent. Let's start with the basics. The federal case against your husband is proceeding rapidly. The evidence Lucian provided was comprehensive enough that the prosecutors are confident they can secure convictions on multiple counts: fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy. Damien's being held on $5 million bail, which his lawyers are trying to reduce, but given the flight risk and severity of charges, that's unlikely. How long until trial? 6 to 8 months, possibly sooner if prosecutors push for an expedited schedule. But here's what matters to you. The forensic analysis of those forged documents has conclusively proven you had no involvement in any financial crimes. The district attorney's office has formally dropped all potential charges against you and issued a public statement to that effect. Relief crashed through Serena so powerfully she had to grip the table. "It's really over? The criminal threat to you is over, yes, but there are other considerations." Rachel slid a document across the table. "Damien's lawyers have indicated they may pursue civil litigation, claiming you defamed him or conspired with outside parties to damage his reputation." Lucian made a sound that might have been a laugh if it contained any humor. "He framed her for crimes he committed, and he thinks he has grounds for defamation?" "It's a stall tactic," Rachel said calmly. "They know they won't win, but filing the suit gives them leverage in settlement negotiations and creates the appearance that Damien is fighting back rather than accepting guilt. It's theater, and it won't go anywhere, but we need to be prepared for it." "What do I need to do?" Serena asked. "Nothing right now. If they file, we'll respond appropriately and likely get it dismissed in preliminary hearings. What you do need to think about is whether you want to file your own civil suit against Damien for the abuse, the fraud, the systematic destruction of your reputation and well-being." The suggestion hung in the air like a grenade. Serena stared at Rachel. "I can do that?" "Absolutely. You have strong grounds for a civil case that could result in significant damages, both compensatory and punitive. Given Damien's assets and the severity of his actions, we're talking potentially millions." "I don't want his money," Serena said immediately. "Then donate it to charity. Use it to help other domestic abuse survivors. Set up a foundation that actually serves children instead of laundering criminal proceeds." Rachel's expression was fierce. "But don't dismiss the option because you think wanting accountability makes you petty or vindictive. It doesn't. It makes you smart." Lucian, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward slightly. "Think of it strategically. A civil judgment against Damien doesn't just hurt him financially. It creates a permanent public record of what he did to you. That matters. Serena looked between them, these two people who understood power and consequences in ways she was only beginning to learn. Can I think about it? Of course, Rachel said. You don't need to decide today, but I want you to know the option exists. A knock on the door interrupted them. Rachel's assistant opened it, stepped aside to reveal two people in dark suits, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a younger man carrying a briefcase. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morrison, the woman said, extending her hand to Serena. This is Agent Marcus Chen from the Financial Crimes Division. Thank you for meeting with us. Serena shook hands mechanically, her heart rate spiking. Rachel gestured to the remaining chairs. Ms. Hale has agreed to speak with you, but I'll be monitoring this conversation closely. If at any point she needs a break or chooses not to answer a question, we stop. Clear? Absolutely, Morrison said, settling into her chair with the practiced ease of someone who spent their life in rooms like this. Ms. Hale, I want to start by saying how sorry I am for what you've been through. What your husband did was unconscionable, and I'm committed to making sure he faces the fullest extent of the law. Thank you, Serena said quietly. Morrison pulled out a tablet, opened a file. The evidence Mr. Drakov provided has been instrumental in building our case. But testimony from you about the pattern of abuse, the coercion, and what you witnessed regarding Damien's criminal activities would strengthen it significantly, particularly in relation to the conspiracy charges involving Senator Harding, Mitchell Grantham, and Klaus Reinhardt. What would that testimony entail? Rachel asked before Serena could respond. Depositions first, possibly grand jury testimony later. If the case goes to trial, we'd ask Ms. Hale to testify about her experiences and what she observed during the time period in question. Morrison's gaze shifted to Serena. I understand this is asking a lot, but your account could help us ensure that everyone involved in this conspiracy faces justice, not just your husband. Serena felt the weight of expectation pressing down like physical force. What happens if I don't testify? We proceed with the evidence we have, Morrison said carefully. The case against Damien is strong enough to guarantee conviction, but the cases against his co-conspirators, particularly Harding and Wu, who were more insulated, become significantly weaker. They might walk away with plea deals that involve minimal consequences. That's not Ms. Hale's responsibility, Rachel interjected firmly. You're asking her to relive trauma and expose herself to public scrutiny to compensate for gaps in your investigation. I'm asking her to help us hold powerful people accountable for enabling abuse and corruption, Morrison countered, her voice remaining professional but pointed. Ms. Hale was a witness to conversations and meetings that directly implicate these individuals. Her testimony could be the difference between justice and impunity. The pressure was exactly what Lucian had warned her about, wrapped in reasonable language appealing to her sense of duty and her desire to see everyone who'd hurt her face consequences. Serena looked at Rachel, who gave her a subtle nod that said she could answer or refuse. The choice was hers. Then she looked at Lucian, whose expression was carefully neutral, offering no guidance because he'd promised this would be her decision. Can I have time to think about it? Serena asked. Morrison's disappointment flickered across her face for just a second before professional composure returned. Of course, but I do need an answer within the next week. The grand jury hearings are scheduled for later this month, and if you're going to testify, we need time to prepare. Ms. Hale will let you know her decision when she's ready, Rachel said, standing in a clear dismissal. Is there anything else? Morrison exchanged a glance with Agent Chen, then stood as well. Just one thing. Ms. Hale, I know this seems overwhelming right now, but I promise you, if you choose to testify, my office will do everything in our power to protect you and ensure the process is as trauma-informed as possible. I appreciate that, Serena said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. After Morrison and Chen left, Rachel closed the door and turned back to the table. You handled that well, but I feel like I'm disappointing everyone by not immediately agreeing, Serena admitted. You're not disappointing anyone who matters, Rachel said firmly. Morrison has a job to do, and getting your testimony would make that job easier. But her job is not more important than your well-being. Remember that. Lucian, who'd remained silent through the entire exchange, finally spoke. You have leverage they're not acknowledging. They need you more than you need them. Don't let them forget that. Serena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. What would you do? She asked Rachel. The lawyer was quiet for a moment, considering. Honestly, I'd testify, but not because of duty or obligation, because it would give me power. Standing in a courtroom and telling the truth about what happened, watching the people who enabled it squirm under cross-examination, seeing their careers implode because I had the courage to speak, that would be deeply satisfying. She paused. But I'm not you. I haven't lived through what you've lived through, and satisfaction might not be worth the cost of reliving trauma publicly. What's the cost? Serena asked quietly. Media scrutiny. Damien's lawyers will try to discredit you, paint you as vindictive or unstable. You'll have to answer questions about intimate details of your marriage in front of strangers. Your testimony will be dissected by legal analysts and armchair experts online. It will be exhausting and invasive and potentially re-traumatizing. Rachel's expression softened, but it will also be powerful, and it might give you closure. Serena looked down at her hands, the same hands that had signed forged documents and poured coffee for men plotting her destruction, and trembled alone in locked bathrooms. Can I watch the proceedings if I don't testify? See what happens? Absolutely. You have every right to be there. Rachel gathered her documents. Think about it. Talk to people you trust, and let me know your decision when you're ready. Whatever you choose, I'll support you completely. They left the office 20 minutes later, Serena's head spinning with information and possibilities. Lucian guided her back to the car in silence, didn't push for conversation, just drove through the city while she processed everything. Do you think I should testify? She finally asked. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. I think you should do whatever feels right when you imagine yourself 5 years from now, looking back at this moment. Will you regret speaking up, or will you regret staying silent? That's not an answer. Yes, it is, just not the one you wanted. Serena almost smiled despite everything. You're infuriating. I've been told that before. They drove in comfortable silence for several minutes before Lucian spoke again. I'm going to tell you something I don't usually share with clients. I'm a client now. You know what I mean. He turned down a tree-lined street, sunlight filtering through leaves. 8 years ago, I had the chance to testify against the organization my father worked for. Federal prosecutors wanted my account of how they operated, who the key players were, what I'd witnessed growing up. They said it would help bring down a network that had operated with impunity for decades. Serena's pulse quickened. Did you do it? No, I was too scared. Too worried about retaliation, about becoming a permanent target, about reliving trauma I'd spent years trying to bury. His jaw tightened. I told myself it was self-preservation, that protecting my safety was more important than helping prosecutors build their case. What happened? They built the case anyway, convicted several key players. But the network survived, restructured, found new leadership, kept operating. And I spent the next 3 years wondering if my testimony could have made the difference. Lucian glanced at her. I'll never know for sure, but I do know that choosing silence to protect myself came with its own costs, just different ones. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Serena studied his profile, seeing past the controlled exterior to the younger version of himself who'd made a choice and lived with its consequences. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Sometimes. Other times, I think I made the only decision I could have made with the information and capacity I had at the time. He pulled into an underground garage, not the loft, somewhere new. But I learned something important. Silence and speech both have prices. You just have to decide which price you're willing to pay. The car came to a stop. Lucian killed the engine but didn't move to get out. I'm telling you this so you know that whatever you choose, it's okay. There's no wrong answer here. Just different paths with different consequences. Serena felt tears burning behind her eyes. Thank you. For what? For not telling me what to do. For trusting me to figure it out. Lucian turned to face her, something unreadable in his expression. You've spent 4 years being told what to do, what to think, what to feel. The last thing you need is someone else making your decisions for you, even with good intentions. Most people don't see it that way. Most people don't understand the difference between helping and controlling. He opened his door. Come on, There's something I want to show you. They took an elevator up 6 floors, walked down a quiet hallway to a door Lucian unlocked with a key Serena hadn't seen him carrying. Inside was an apartment, smaller than the others, brighter, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a park she didn't recognize. "Where are we?" Serena asked. "Somewhere you can stay if you want it." Lucian moved through the space, opening curtains, letting light flood in. "The lease is paid for the next 6 months, utilities included, security system installed. It's yours if you need it." Serena stared at him. "You rented me an apartment?" "I secured a safe space where you can rebuild without worrying about housing or money or Damien's lawyers tracking you down. There's a difference." "Lucian, before you argue, listen." He turned to face her fully. "You're going to need somewhere to live while the divorce proceedings happen and the legal cases unfold. Going back to the Mercer estate isn't safe or healthy. Staying at your sister's means questions and opinions and family dynamics you don't need right now. And the safe houses I've been using aren't meant for long-term residents. I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because—" Serena struggled to articulate the tangle of emotions. "Because you've already done too much. Because I can't keep taking from you without giving anything back. Because this feels like—" "Like what?" Lucian's voice was quiet, steady. "Like I'm trading one form of dependence for another." The words hung in the air between them, honest and painful. Lucian absorbed them without flinching. "You're not dependent on me," he said finally. "You're accepting help while you get your feet under you. There's a difference. You can leave any time you want. Change the locks if you want. Tell me to disappear and never contact you again if you want. This apartment has your name on the lease, not mine. I have no access, no control, no claim. It's yours." "Why would you do that?" "Because everyone deserves a safe place to land when their world falls apart. And because you need space to figure out who you are when you're not being watched or controlled or manipulated." He paused. "Take the apartment or don't. Stay in it or find somewhere else. I'm offering options, not obligations." Serena walked to the windows, looked out at the park below where people were walking dogs and children were playing, and life was continuing normally despite the fact that her entire existence had been upended. The apartment was beautiful. Hardwood floors, updated kitchen, enough space to breathe without feeling lost. It felt like possibility. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, you'll take it?" "Okay, I'll think about it." She turned to face him. "Can I see the rest?" Lucian showed her through the space: bedroom with an attached bathroom, second bedroom that could be an office, closets already stocked with basics, a kitchen with actual groceries in the refrigerator. He'd thought of everything, prepared for a future where she'd need independence and safety simultaneously. "When did you do all this?" Serena asked. "Started putting it together 2 weeks ago. Finished yesterday while you were sleeping." "You work fast." "I work efficiently. There's a difference." Serena found herself smiling despite the weight of everything. "You keep making those distinctions." "Because they matter." Lucian leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed in that familiar pose. "Words are weapons or shields depending on how you use them. Precision matters." "Is that something you learned growing up?" "That's something I learned surviving." The honesty in his voice made something tighten in Serena's chest. She studied him in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. This man who'd built his entire life around helping people escape the kinds of traps he'd once been caught in, who operated in shadows and gray areas because the system failed too often to be trusted, who'd saved her life and asked for nothing except her willingness to save herself. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." Serena took a breath. "Do you have anyone? Family? Friends? Someone you go home to when you're not orchestrating other people's salvation?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I have people I work with. Allies I trust in specific contexts. Contacts who owe me favors or vice versa." "That's not what I asked." "I know." He met her eyes. "No, I don't have anyone like that. Haven't for a long time." "Why not?" "Because the work I do requires operating alone. Attachments create vulnerabilities. People you care about become leverage other people can use against you." He paused. "It's safer this way." "Safer," Serena repeated, "but lonelier." "Yes." The admission was so simple, so matter-of-fact, that it made Serena's heart ache. Don't you want more than that? Want and wisdom don't always align. That's not an answer either. Lucian's mouth curved slightly. You're getting very good at calling me on evasion. I had an excellent teacher in manipulation. Recognizing it comes easier now. Something shifted in his expression, pain maybe, or recognition of shared damage. I'm not manipulating you, Serena. I know, but you're still not answering the question. He was quiet for several seconds, weighing something she couldn't see. Then carefully, yes, sometimes I want more. Want to trust someone enough to let them see past the walls. Want to come home to something other than empty apartments and operational planning. He paused. But wanting and having are different things, and the cost of trying usually outweighs the potential benefit. What cost? Vulnerability. The risk that caring about someone will compromise my judgment or make me hesitate when hesitation could be fatal. Lucian's voice remained steady, clinical. I've seen what happens when people in my line of work get attached. They make mistakes. Get people killed, destroy the very thing they were trying to protect. So you choose loneliness instead. I choose effectiveness. Serena moved closer, stopped just within arm's reach. You can't live like that forever. I've managed for 8 years. That's not the same as living. That's just surviving. Lucian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Surviving kept me alive. Living gets people killed. Or, Serena said quietly, it gives you something worth staying alive for. The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Lucian held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind his carefully controlled expression. You should think about the testimony, he said finally, deflecting. About what feels right, and about whether you want this apartment or somewhere else. I can think about multiple things simultaneously. I'm sure you can. He moved toward the door. I have meetings this afternoon. People who need to understand that Klaus Reinhardt's arrest means their protection is gone and cooperation is their only option. You should rest, maybe call your sister back, start processing everything. You're leaving? I'm giving you space. Lucian paused in the doorway. The door locks automatically when you leave. Keys are on the counter. If you decide you want to stay here, it's yours. If not, there's no obligation. Lucian, I'll call you tonight, he interrupted gently. Make sure you're okay, but right now you need time alone to think without me hovering. Before Serena could respond, he was gone, the door closing with a soft click, leaving her alone in an apartment that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She stood in the empty living room for a long time, listening to silence that felt different from the silence she'd lived with for 4 years. This wasn't the controlled quiet of the Mercer estate, where even breathing felt monitored. This was the simple absence of noise, the kind of peace that came from being genuinely alone instead of isolated. Serena walked to the windows, looked out at the park, and tried to imagine herself living here, waking up in the morning without fear, making coffee without calculating Damien's mood, existing without performing. It felt possible. Terrifying, but possible. Her phone buzzed. Emma again, the 17th unanswered call. Serena stared at her sister's name on the screen, then made a decision. She answered. Serena, thank heavens. Emma's voice was tight with worry. I've been calling all day. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm fine. I'm safe. Serena surprised herself with how steady her voice sounded. I'm sorry I didn't call back sooner. I needed time to process everything. Process? Your husband was arrested for fraud and corruption. You were nearly destroyed in front of the entire city, and you disappeared with some man no one knows anything about. I've been losing my mind. The man you're talking about is the reason I'm alive and not in federal custody myself, Serena said quietly. He helped me when no one else did. Emma was silent for a beat. I would have helped if you'd told me what was happening. I tried telling you. 6 months ago when I said Damien was changing, that something felt wrong. You told me I was being paranoid. Because you wouldn't give me details. You just kept saying things felt off without explaining what that meant. Because I didn't have the language for it yet, Serena said, feeling old frustration rising. I didn't know how to articulate that my husband was systematically isolating me and preparing to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. I just knew something was wrong. I'm sorry, Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. I should have listened better. Should have pushed harder to understand. I liked Damien. He seemed so good for you. He seemed good for everyone. That was the point. Another silence, heavier this time. What happens now? Emma asked. I don't know yet. I'm figuring it out. Serena looked around the apartment, at the clean lines and empty spaces waiting to be filled. But I'm safe, and I'm making my own choices for the first time in 4 years. That's enough for now. Can I see you? Take you to lunch or coffee or just, I don't know, be there somehow? The offer was genuine, Serena could hear that. But she also heard the guilt, the need to fix things, the desire to jump back into sisterhood like the past 6 months of distance hadn't happened. Not yet, Serena said gently. I need some time alone to process everything. But I'll call you soon, I promise. Okay. Emma sounded disappointed, but resigned. I love you. You know that, right? I know. And she did, which somehow made the distance harder. I love you too. After she hung up, Serena stood in the quiet apartment and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd set a boundary with her sister, without apologizing or over-explaining or managing Emma's emotional reaction. It felt strange. It felt powerful. Her phone buzzed again, not Emma this time, but a text from Lucian. Did you eat today? Serena found herself smiling despite everything. She typed back, Does coffee count? His response came immediately. No. There's a Vietnamese place 2 blocks north, best pho in the city. Order the combination bowl. Are you always this bossy about food? Only with people who forget to take care of themselves. Serena looked at the exchange, at this man who orchestrated federal investigations and dismantled criminal empires, but also made sure she ate properly and had safe places to sleep. Thank you, she typed. For what? For everything. For the apartment, the advice, the space to think. For not making my decisions for me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you're welcome. Now go eat. She did. The Vietnamese restaurant was exactly where Lucian said it would be, small and warm and filled with the smell of star anise and fresh herbs. Serena ordered the combination pho, sat in a corner booth, and let the steam rise around her face like a shield against the world. The soup was perfect, rich broth, tender meat, noodles that had the right amount of chew. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, remembering what it felt like to enjoy food without calculating whether Damien would criticize her choices or use meals as opportunities for control. Halfway through the bowl, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She almost didn't look, but curiosity won. The headline made her hands freeze around the spoon. Senator Harding subpoenaed in Mercer corruption case. Serena clicked through to the article, read about how federal prosecutors had issued subpoenas for financial records, communication logs, and testimony from multiple high-ranking officials connected to Damien's network. Senator Harding's name appeared 6 times. So did Mitchell Grantham's and Marcus Wu's. The network was collapsing faster than she'd expected. Another text from Lucian. Saw the news, you okay? I don't know what I am, Serena replied honestly, but I'm not scared anymore. That's something. That's everything. She finished her soup, paid, and walked back to the apartment through streets that felt different now, less threatening, more navigable. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Serena felt like she could breathe all the way down. Back in the apartment, she stood at the windows and watched night fall over the city. Lights blinked on in buildings across the skyline. Traffic moved in rivers of red and white. Life continued its relentless forward motion regardless of individual catastrophes. Serena pulled out her phone and opened a new message to Rachel Kincaid. I've made my decision about testifying, she typed. I want to do it. She stared at the words for a long moment, feeling the weight of them, the commitment they represented. Then she pressed send before she could second-guess herself. Rachel's response came within minutes. Good. We'll prepare you thoroughly. You won't be alone in this. Serena sent one more message, this one to Lucian. I'm going to testify. His response was immediate. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. A pause, then, I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than they should have, bringing tears Serena hadn't expected. She sank onto the couch in the empty apartment and let herself cry, not from fear or grief this time, but from something closer to relief. She was making choices, setting boundaries, taking up space, fighting back. And somewhere in the city, the man who'd saved her life was making sure that everyone who'd helped destroy it would face consequences. Serena didn't know what came next, didn't know if testifying would give her closure or reopen wounds she'd barely started healing, didn't know if this apartment would become a home or just another temporary shelter. But for the first time in 4 years, she had the power to find out. And that, she was learning, was what freedom actually meant. The grand jury hearing took place 3 weeks later in a federal courthouse that smelled like old wood and institutional disinfectant. Serena sat in a witness waiting room with Rachel beside her, going over testimony points for the 4th time that morning while her pulse hammered against her ribs. "Remember," Rachel said quietly, "you're not on trial here. You're providing evidence about what you witnessed. Answer the questions directly, don't elaborate unless asked, and if you need a break at any point, just say so." Serena nodded, her hands clasped tight in her lap to keep them from shaking. She'd spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment, meeting with prosecutors, reviewing documents, practicing testimony until the words felt like stones in her mouth. But now that it was actually happening, every instinct screamed at her to run. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Rachel's voice was firm but kind. "You've already done the hard part. You survived. You gathered evidence. You chose to fight back. This is just telling the truth about what happened." "What if they don't believe me?" "They will, because you'll be telling the truth and the documentation backs up every word." Rachel squeezed her hand once. "You're stronger than you think, Serena." The door opened. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morrison appeared, her expression professionally neutral. "We're ready for you, Ms. Hale." Serena stood on legs that didn't feel entirely solid. Rachel walked with her to the hearing room door, then stopped. "I can't go in with you," Rachel said, "but I'll be right here when you come out, however long it takes." Serena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked through the door alone. The grand jury room was smaller than she'd expected. 23 ordinary people sitting in tiered rows, watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy to careful neutrality. Morrison guided her to a chair facing them, administered the oath, and began with the gentlest possible question. "Ms. Hale, can you tell us about your marriage to Damian Mercer?" And Serena began to speak. She told them about the first year when Damian had been charming and attentive, gradually isolating her from friends and family with suggestions that felt like care instead of control. She described the second year, when the isolation became explicit. Phone calls monitored, movements tracked, decisions made for her under the guise of protection. The third year, when the verbal abuse started, carefully calibrated to chip away at her confidence without leaving visible marks. And the fourth year, when everything had escalated. "He started bringing documents home," Serena said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "Financial paperwork for the foundation. He'd put them in front of me during dinner, tell me they were routine updates that needed my signature as a board member. I didn't question it. I'd learned by then that questioning Damian only made things worse." Morrison pulled up images on a screen, the same documents Lucian had found in Damian's office. "Do you recognize these?" "Yes. Those are some of the papers I signed." Serena's stomach turned, looking at her own signature, so carefully forged on the ones she'd never actually touched. But not all of them. The ones dated after March. "I never saw those." "That's not my signature." "How can you be certain?" "Because I wasn't home those dates. I have receipts from a medical clinic where I was being treated for injuries from one of Damian's rages." The words came out flat, factual. She'd practiced this part until the emotion drained away, leaving only truth. "He fractured 2 of my ribs. I told the hospital I fell downstairs." Murmurs rippled through the grand jury. Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes softened. "Ms. Hale, did you ever witness your husband meeting with Klaus Reinhardt?" "Yes, 3 months before his arrest." Serena described the late-night meeting, the argument about timing, Grantham and Senator Harding's presence. She recounted every detail she could remember, her voice growing stronger as she realized the grand jury was listening. Really listening, not dismissing or doubting or suggesting she'd misunderstood. The testimony lasted 4 hours. Morrison walked her through meeting after meeting, document after document, building a comprehensive picture of conspiracy that extended far beyond Damien's individual crimes. By the time they finished, Serena's throat was raw and her hands were shaking, but something inside her felt lighter. She'd told the truth, all of it, and they'd believed her. When Morrison finally said, "Thank you, Ms. Hale, you're dismissed," Serena walked out of that hearing room with her head up and her shoulders back, feeling like she'd reclaimed something essential that Damien had spent 4 years trying to destroy. Rachel was waiting exactly where she'd promised. "How do you feel?" "Exhausted," Serena admitted. "But good, like I finally said everything I needed to say." "You did beautifully. Morrison told me they'll likely vote to indict all 4 co-conspirators based on your testimony and the supporting evidence." The weight of that settled over Serena, not heavy, but substantial. Her words were going to have consequences, real, lasting consequences for people who'd helped Damien build his empire of lies. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait for the indictments. Then trial preparation begins." Rachel guided her toward the exit. "But that's months away. Today, you rest. You've earned it." Outside the courthouse, Lucian was waiting beside his car, looking exactly as he always did, controlled, watchful, radiating quiet danger. His eyes found Serena's immediately, scanning her face for signs of damage. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," Serena said, surprised to realize it was true. "I really am." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or pride. "Good. Let's get you out of here before the media finds out you testified." They drove through the city in comfortable silence, Serena watching the buildings blur past while her mind processed what she'd just done. She'd stood in front of strangers and spoken about the worst moments of her life, had answered invasive questions about abuse and control and systematic destruction, had provided the evidence needed to ensure that everyone who'd enabled Damien would face justice, and she'd survived it. "Thank you," she said quietly. Lucian glanced at her. "For what? For believing I could do this, for not pushing when I wasn't ready, for being here when I came out." "I told you I would be." "I know, but people say things they don't mean all the time. You're different." His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "I don't make promises I can't keep." "I'm learning that." They pulled into the parking garage beneath Serena's apartment building, her apartment now, officially. She'd signed the lease 2 weeks ago, moved in her few belongings, started building something that felt tentatively like a life. Emma had visited once, awkward but trying. Rachel checked in regularly, and Lucian appeared every few days with food or updates or simply to make sure she was still okay. "Do you want to come up?" Serena asked as they walked to the elevator. Lucian hesitated. "I should get back. I have—" "Please." She met his eyes. "I don't want to be alone right now." The admission cost her something. Serena had spent weeks practicing independence, learning to exist without needing someone else's presence to validate her existence. But today, after 4 hours of testimony and emotional excavation, she genuinely didn't want to sit alone in her apartment processing everything. And she wanted Lucian's company specifically. "Okay," he said quietly. Upstairs, Serena made coffee while Lucian stood at the windows looking out at the park where autumn leaves were starting to turn gold and crimson. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar, weighted with things neither had named yet. "Morrison thinks the grand jury will indict all 4, Serena said, handing him a cup. "Grantham, Harding, Wu, and Caruso." "They will." Lucian accepted the coffee. "Your testimony was the final piece they needed. Combined with the financial evidence and Reinhardt's cooperation from Berlin, the case is airtight." "Reinhardt's cooperating?" "Extensively. Turns out facing 20 years in a German prison makes people very willing to discuss their American business partners." A cold smile crossed his face. "He's provided documentation of every transaction, every meeting, every illegal scheme Damien's network facilitated. It's comprehensive enough to destroy careers across 3 countries. Serena absorbed this, feeling something fierce and satisfied settle in her chest. "Good." "Yes," Lucian agreed, "it is." They drank their coffee in silence for a moment before Serena spoke again. What happens to you after this? What do you mean? When the trials are over and everyone's been convicted and justice has been served, what do you do? Move on to the next person who needs saving? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Probably. Don't you ever want something different? Want and wisdom don't always align. We've discussed this. That was weeks ago, before some... Serena stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. Before what? Before she'd spent 3 weeks having dinner with him twice a week? Before she'd started looking forward to his texts, checking if she'd eaten? Before she'd realized that the only person she wanted to celebrate her small victories with was a man who'd saved her life and asked for nothing in return? Before what? Lucian prompted gently. Before I started thinking that maybe you deserve something more than operational efficiency and empty apartments. His expression flickered, surprise maybe, or carefully controlled hope. Serena, I know, she interrupted. I know this is complicated. I'm still legally married, still processing trauma, still figuring out who I am when I'm not being controlled. And you operate in dangerous spaces where attachments are liabilities. She set down her coffee, met his eyes. But I also know that you've been the only truly honest presence in my life for months. And I think... She paused, gathering courage. I think you might feel something too. Lucian was very still, his expression carefully neutral in the way it got when he was protecting himself. What I feel doesn't matter. Yes, it does. No. His voice was quiet but firm. What matters is your recovery, your healing. You rebuilding your life without someone else's agenda shaping your choices. Getting involved with me, with anyone, right now would be the opposite of healthy. So you do feel something. A ghost of a smile crossed his face despite everything. You're getting too good at reading subtext. I had an excellent teacher in manipulation. I learned to listen for what people aren't saying. Serena moved closer, stopped just within arm's reach. I'm not asking for promises or commitments or anything you're not ready to give. I'm just asking if what I'm feeling is mutual. Lucian looked at her for a long moment, something unguarded flickering behind his carefully controlled expression. Then quietly, yes, it's mutual. The admission hung between them, honest and dangerous and utterly undeniable. Serena felt her heart rate spike, felt the magnetic pull of proximity, felt the desire to close the distance between them and see what happened. But Lucian stepped back. Which is exactly why we can't act on it, he said firmly. Not now. Not while you're still in crisis mode and rebuilding from scratch. You need time to discover who you are, independent of anyone else's influence, including mine. Serena wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she was capable of making her own decisions and knew what she wanted. But beneath the disappointment was recognition that he was right. She'd spent 4 years having choices made for her. Jumping into something new, even something genuine, without first establishing her own foundation, would be repeating old patterns with different players. You're right, she admitted. I hate it, but you're right. I usually am about these things. That doesn't make you less infuriating. No, Lucian agreed. It doesn't. He set down his coffee, moved toward the door. Serena felt panic flutter in her chest. The irrational fear that if he left now, this fragile understanding between them would evaporate. Where are you going? She asked. Giving you space to process today without my presence complicating things. He paused at the door. But I'll call you tomorrow. Make sure you're okay. Promise? Promise. After he left, Serena stood in her apartment feeling the full weight of what had just happened. She'd testified against her husband's co-conspirators, had admitted her feelings to a man who'd saved her life, had been told, gently but firmly, that acting on those feelings would be unwise. And somehow, despite the rejection, she felt more respected than she had in years. Because Lucian hadn't taken advantage of her vulnerability, hadn't used her admitted feelings to gain influence or control, had instead prioritized her long-term well-being over short-term gratification. That was care. Real, honest care that didn't demand anything in return. Serena pulled out her phone and sent him a text. Thank you for being honest, and for caring enough to say no. His response came quickly. Always. Now eat something and get some rest. She smiled despite everything, ordered Thai food, and spent the evening watching the city lights blink on while processing the strangest, most emotionally complicated day she'd experienced since the gala. The indictments came down 2 weeks later, All four co-conspirators charged with conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. The media exploded with the story, dissecting every detail, analyzing every connection, turning Damian Mercer's empire into a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and systemic corruption. Serena watched the coverage from her apartment, Lucian beside her on the couch, both of them drinking coffee and witnessing the final collapse of everything Damian had built. Senator Harding resigned this morning, Lucian observed as a news anchor discussed political fallout. Grantham's been disbarred pending trial. Marcus Wu's company lost 3 major contracts. And Vincent Caruso. He smiled coldly. Caruso's trying to negotiate a plea deal by offering testimony against everyone else. Will it work? Probably get him reduced charges. But his career in politics is over either way. Lucian glanced at her. How do you feel watching this? Serena considered the question seriously. Satisfied. Maybe a little sad that it took this long and this much damage. But mostly just satisfied that they're finally facing consequences. That's healthy. Is it? Yes. You're not celebrating their destruction or fixating on revenge. You're just acknowledging that accountability matters. He paused. That's growth. The trial date was set for 6 months later, plenty of time for both sides to prepare, for media interest to intensify, for Serena to continue the work of rebuilding her life piece by piece. She started therapy with the trauma specialist Rachel recommended, reconnected with friends she'd lost contact with during her marriage, took a part-time job at a women's shelter, using her experience to help others recognize the signs of abuse she'd missed in herself. And slowly, carefully, she started becoming someone she actually recognized. Emma visited more regularly, their relationship healing in fits and starts. Her sister had apologized properly, without excuses or deflection, and was making genuine effort to understand what Serena had survived. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Lucian remained a constant presence, though carefully boundaried. He checked in regularly, provided updates on the case, took her to dinner once a week in restaurants where they could talk without the weight of everything else pressing down. But he never pushed for more, never leveraged her admitted feelings, never treated their relationship as anything other than friendship built on mutual respect. It should have been frustrating. Instead, it felt safe. 6 months passed faster than Serena expected. The trial began on a cold January morning, the courthouse surrounded by media vans and protesters and people with opinions about guilt and justice and whether powerful people ever truly faced consequences. Serena testified on the 4th day, not before the grand jury this time, but in open court, with cameras recording and journalists documenting every word. Damian's lawyer tried to paint her as vindictive and unstable, tried to suggest she'd fabricated evidence or misremembered events. But Rachel had prepared her well, and the documented evidence backed up every word. Serena sat on that witness stand for 6 hours, answering questions with steady composure, watching Damian's face across the courtroom as his lawyer's strategy crumbled under the weight of truth. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by prison jumpsuit and circumstances, stripped of the polish and charisma that had fooled so many people for so long. When Morrison asked her final question, Ms. Halle, do you have any doubt about what you witnessed and experienced? Serena looked directly at Damian and answered clearly, none whatsoever. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy, Serena was sitting in the gallery between Rachel and Lucian, watching justice finally, conclusively arrive. Damian Mercer was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. Mitchell Grantham got 15. Senator Harding received 12, though her political career had already ended in disgrace. Marcus Wu negotiated down to 8 years through cooperation. And Vincent Caruso, who testified against everyone else, received 5 years in permanent exile from politics. Outside the courthouse after sentencing, reporters swarmed with questions. Rachel handled them with professional efficiency while Lucian guided Serena to his car through a side exit, shielding her from cameras and microphones. How do you feel? He asked once they were safely away. Serena thought about it seriously. Like I can finally breathe all the way down, like the weight I've been carrying for years just lifted. That's closure. Is it always this exhausting? Usually. Lucian navigated through downtown traffic. But it gets easier. The weight stays gone. You learn to live without it. They drove to Serena's apartment in comfortable silence. Inside, she made coffee out of habit. Then they stood at the windows, watching the city continue its relentless motion while everything else settled. What happens now? Serena asked quietly. Now you decide what kind of life you want to build. Lucian set down his cup. The legal battles are over. Damien's in prison. His co-conspirators are facing consequences. You're free to become whoever you want to be. And you? He was quiet for a long moment. I have other cases, other people who need help navigating systems that failed them. So you just leave? Move on to the next crisis? That's the job. Serena turned to face him fully. What if I asked you to stay? Lucian's expression flickered, carefully controlled hope fighting with habitual caution. Serena, I know what you're going to say, that I need more time, that getting involved would be complicated, that attachments create vulnerabilities. She moved closer. But it's been 6 months, 6 months of therapy and growth, and learning to exist independently. I know who I am now, and I know what I want. What do you want? A chance to see if this, she gestured between them. If what we both feel is something real or just trauma bonding and proximity. And if it's the latter, then we figure that out together like adults. But I think, Serena paused, gathering courage. I think it's more than that. I think you've been keeping your distance because you're scared of what happens if you stop. Lucian was very still, his dark eyes searching her face for something. You're right, I am scared. The admission landed between them, honest and vulnerable and completely unexpected. Serena felt her heart rate spike. Of what? She asked gently. Of caring about someone enough that losing them would destroy me. Of making mistakes because my judgment's compromised by feelings. Of becoming the thing I've spent years avoiding, attached, vulnerable, dependent on someone else's presence to feel complete. He paused. I've built my entire life around being untouchable. Letting you in means dismantling that. Would that be so terrible? I don't know. I've never tried. Serena stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pulse jumped in his throat. Maybe it's time to find out. You deserve better than someone who operates in gray areas and has more enemies than friends. I deserve someone who sees me clearly and chooses me anyway. Someone honest and brave and willing to fight for what matters. She met his eyes. That's you, Lucian, whether you operate in gray areas or not. For a long moment, neither moved. Then slowly, Lucian reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle and deliberate. If we do this, he said quietly, we do it right. No rushing, no using each other to fill voids or avoid processing trauma. We build something real or we don't build anything at all. I can agree to that. And if at any point you realize this isn't what you want, if being with me becomes another cage instead of freedom, you tell me immediately. Same goes for you. A slight smile crossed his face. Deal. Then he kissed her, careful and deliberate, like he was memorizing the moment, like this was something precious that needed protection. Serena kissed him back, feeling the careful control in how he touched her, the restraint that came from respecting boundaries and prioritizing consent. It felt nothing like Damien's possessive demands. It felt like choice. When they pulled apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers, breathing carefully. We should take this slow. Probably, Serena agreed. I mean it. I know, she smiled. But we can take it slow starting tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to sit here and not feel alone. I can do that. They settled onto the couch, Serena leaning against Lucian's chest while he wrapped one arm around her shoulders, both of them watching the city lights blink on as evening settled over the skyline. It felt comfortable and new simultaneously, the beginning of something they'd both been avoiding acknowledging. Thank you, Serena said quietly. For what? For saving my life, for giving me the tools to save myself, for being patient while I figured out who I was. She paused. For being honest when honesty was harder than lying. Lucian's arm tightened slightly around her. You did the hard work. I just provided support. You provided more than that. You provided hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. They sat in comfortable silence while darkness deepened outside, and the apartment filled with the kind of peace Serena had spent years believing was impossible. Her phone buzzed. Emma, checking in like she'd been doing regularly since the trial ended. Serena responded quickly, promising to call tomorrow, then set the phone aside. "Your sister's trying," Lucian observed. "She is. We're getting there." Serena shifted to look at him. "What about you? Any family you've reconnected with?" "No. That bridge burned years ago." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "But I've built something else. People I trust. Allies who've become friends. It's not traditional family, but it works. Will you introduce me to them? Eventually, when you're ready to meet people who operate in the same gray area as I do. I think I'm tougher than you give me credit for." "I know exactly how tough you are. That's not the question." Lucian looked down at her. "The question is whether exposing you to my world serves your healing or compromises it. Let me make that call." "Fair enough." More silent, comfortable, and weighted with possibilities. Serena felt exhaustion creeping in, the good kind that came from resolution instead of fear. "Stay tonight?" she asked quietly. Lucian hesitated. "Serena, not like that, just stay. Sleep on the couch or in the guest room. I just don't want to wake up alone after today." Understanding flickered across his face. "Okay, I can do that." "Thank you." He did stay. Slept in the guest room after making sure Serena was settled, after checking the locks and security system with the kind of thoroughness that came from professional paranoia. And when Serena woke in the middle of the night from a nightmare about courtrooms and cameras, Lucian appeared in her doorway within seconds, somehow knowing she needed presence without her having to ask. He sat on the edge of her bed, one hand covering hers, until her breathing steadied and the panic receded. "I'm okay," Serena whispered. "I know, but I'm staying until you fall back asleep anyway." And he did. Weeks passed, then months. Serena and Lucian built something careful and deliberate, dinners and conversations, slowly increasing trust, learning each other's boundaries and histories. He introduced her to his network of allies, people who operated in shadows but followed their own codes of ethics. She brought him to family dinners with Emma, watching him navigate normal social situations with the same strategic precision he applied to everything else. It wasn't perfect. They had arguments about risk and transparency and how much of Lucian's work Serena should be exposed to. Had moments when old trauma surfaced and made intimacy difficult. Had to consciously work against patterns they'd both developed during years of survival. But it was real. And it was theirs. A year after Damien's sentencing, Serena stood in a conference room downtown, signing final divorce papers that made her freedom legal and absolute. Rachel had negotiated a settlement that gave Serena significant assets, money Damien had tried to hide, properties purchased with stolen funds, investments made with corruption's proceeds. "What are you going to do with it?" Rachel asked. Serena had already decided. Start a foundation, a real one this time, helping domestic abuse survivors rebuild their lives, housing assistance, legal support, therapy funding, everything I needed and couldn't access. "That's perfect," Rachel smiled. "You're going to help a lot of people." "I hope so." Outside the lawyer's office, Lucian was waiting beside his car, looking exactly as he had the night they'd met. Controlled, watchful, radiating quiet danger. But now Serena knew what existed beneath that exterior. Knew the scars and the softness, the strategic mind and the unexpected kindness, the man who'd chosen to weaponize his survival into salvation for others. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free." Serena looked at the divorce papers in her hand, then at the man who'd helped her reclaim her life. "Actually genuinely free." "Good." He opened the car door. "Where to?" "Somewhere we can celebrate properly. Somewhere that serves excellent wine and doesn't ask questions about what we're celebrating." Lucian smiled, the real smile she'd learned to recognize, the one he reserved for moments when his careful control could slip without consequence. "I know exactly the place." They drove through the city as evening settled, traffic thinning, lights beginning to blink on across the skyline. Serena watched the familiar streets blur past and felt something settle in her chest, peace that came from choices made freely and futures built deliberately. "I love you," she said quietly. Lucian's hands tightened on the wheel for just a second. Then carefully, I love you too. The words were simple, but weighted with everything they'd both learned about trust and vulnerability and choosing connection despite risk. Serena reached across the console, laced her fingers through his, felt the familiar scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence transformed into protection. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible, for believing I was worth saving, for giving me the tools to save myself and then stepping back to let me use them. Lucian brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the space to do it. We saved each other, Serena corrected. You gave me freedom. I'm giving you connection. Fair trade. More than fair. They pulled into a parking garage beneath a restaurant Serena didn't recognize. Upscale but quiet. The kind of place where people came for privacy instead of spectacle. Inside, they were led to a corner table with windows overlooking the river, city lights reflecting on dark water like scattered diamonds. Over wine and dinner, they talked about the foundation Serena was building, about Lucian's current case helping a journalist expose corporate fraud, about the life they were constructing together piece by careful piece. I have something for you, Lucian said as dessert arrived. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, slid it across the table. Serena opened it to find a key. Simple, silver, no markings. What's this? She asked. To my loft, the original safe house where I first took you. His dark eyes met hers. I want you to have access, not because I'm asking you to move in or making assumptions about our future, just because you should know you're welcome in my space, that there are no locked doors between us unless you choose to lock them. Serena felt tears burning behind her eyes, because the gesture wasn't about possession or control, it was about trust. About Lucian, who'd spent 8 years keeping everyone at arm's length, choosing to let her in completely. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to use it. I just want you to have it. I know. She closed her hand around the key. But I will use it, because I want to be part of your life, not just someone you visit in mine. Something shifted in Lucian's expression, relief and hope and carefully controlled joy. Okay. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, then walked along the river while the city hummed around them. Serena leaned against Lucian's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them watching water flow past and carrying the last remnants of her old life away into darkness. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Helping me? Getting involved when you could have just walked away? Never. Lucian's voice was certain, absolute. Knowing you, watching you rebuild, being part of your journey from survival to thriving, that's been the most meaningful thing I've done in years. Even though it complicated your carefully controlled life? Especially because of that. He turned to face her, one hand cupping her cheek. You taught me that living and surviving aren't the same thing. That connection might be risky, but isolation guarantees loneliness. That some things, some people, are worth the vulnerability they require. Serena kissed him, tasting wine and possibility and the promise of futures they'd build together. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Lucian rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight? He asked quietly. At the loft. Let me show you the space I'm offering to share. Yes. They drove through late-night streets to the building Serena remembered from her first night of freedom. The loft looked different now. Warmer somehow. Less like a way station between crises and more like a home waiting to be shared. Lucian made coffee while Serena explored spaces she'd barely noticed before, seeing evidence of the life he'd built alone. Books in multiple languages. Photographs of places she'd never been. A chess set on a side table. Pieces frozen mid-game. Evidence of a full interior life carefully hidden beneath operational efficiency. You play? Serena asked, gesturing to the chess set. When I need to think through complicated problems, strategy helps. Will you teach me? Lucian smiled. I'd like that. They settled onto the couch with coffee, Serena curled against his side, both of them watching the city through floor-to-ceiling windows while the night deepened around them. What happens next? Serena asked. For us, I mean. After tonight. We keep building, keep learning each other, keep making choices that serve our growth instead of our fears. Lucian's hand traced patterns on her shoulder, absent and soothing. No rush, no pressure, just seeing where this goes when we're both choosing it freely. I can work with that. Good. Serena tilted her head to look at him. I meant what I said earlier. I love you. I know. His expression softened. I love you too. Even though that terrifies me sometimes. Me too, but less than it used to. That's growth. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blink and shift while exhaustion finally caught up with everything. Lucien showed Serena to the bedroom, his bedroom this time, not a guest space, and they lay down together fully clothed, neither pushing for more than presence. Thank you for tonight, Serena whispered in the darkness. Thank you for trusting me enough to be here. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, steady and certain beside her, and dreamed of futures instead of nightmares. Morning came with pale light and the smell of coffee. Serena woke alone in Lucien's bed, found him in the kitchen already dressed and making breakfast with the same careful efficiency he applied to everything. Good morning, he said, handing her a cup. Morning. She accepted it, kissed him gently. What's the plan for today? Whatever you want. I cleared my schedule. Just for me? Yes. Serena felt warmth spread through her chest. Then I want to spend the day doing absolutely nothing important, walking through the city, finding good coffee, maybe visiting that park near my apartment, just existing together without agendas or timelines. I can do that. And they did. Spent the entire day moving through the city like ordinary people without crises to manage or battles to fight. Had lunch at a cafe where nobody recognized them. Walked through the park where leaves were turning brilliant colors and children played on swings. Existed in the simple present tense of two people choosing each other deliberately. By evening, Serena felt something settle inside her, peace that came from futures built intentionally instead of survived desperately. She looked at Lucien beside her on a park bench, his hand covering hers, and realized with sudden clarity that this was what freedom actually meant. Not the absence of connection, but the ability to choose it. Not isolation masquerading as independence, but genuine partnership built on mutual respect. Not surviving alone, but thriving together. I'm happy, she said quietly, surprised by the truth of it. Lucien turned to look at her, something soft and unguarded in his expression. So am I. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, both of them believed it completely. The foundation Serena built, officially named the Second Chance Initiative, opened its doors 6 months later. The ceremony was small, intimate, attended by people who'd supported her journey from destruction to reconstruction. Emma gave a speech about resilience. Rachel talked about the importance of systemic support for abuse survivors. And Lucien stood in the back, watching Serena address the crowd with confidence and purpose, seeing the woman she'd become when given space to grow. Later, after everyone left and the building was quiet, Serena and Lucien stood in the empty lobby surrounded by resources that would help hundreds of people rebuild their lives. You did it, Lucien said quietly. Turned your pain into purpose. We did it, Serena corrected. None of this would exist without you. I just provided tools and strategy. You provided the vision and courage. We're a good team. Yes, Lucien agreed. We are. Serena turned to face him fully, taking both his hands. I have something to ask you. His expression flickered with carefully controlled hope. What? Move in with me. Properly. Not just visiting or using keys or sleeping over sometimes. Actually share a life together. She paused. I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow. But it's been almost 2 years since that gala, and I know what I want. I want to wake up with you every morning. Want to build something real instead of just surviving separately. Want you to stop keeping emergency exits open just in case. Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Are you sure? Completely. Living with me means living with everything I do. The cases, the risks, the people who might come looking for revenge. I know, and I'm choosing it anyway. Serena squeezed his hands. You chose me when I was at my lowest. Let me choose you at your most real. Something cracked in Lucien's carefully controlled expression. Vulnerability and hope, and the beginning of trust that went deeper than strategy. Okay? Okay? Yes. Let's do this. Build something real together. Serena kissed him, tasting coffee and promise, and the future they'd both been too scared to reach for until now. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Lucian held her close and whispered against her hair, I love you, even though it terrifies me. Even though I don't know how to do this perfectly. I love you. I love you too. Imperfections and all. They stood in the quiet foundation lobby, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build light together, and felt the weight of everything they'd survived transform into strength for everything they'd create. Outside, the city continued its relentless motion, people living and struggling and rebuilding, systems failing and succeeding, justice arriving slowly but arriving nonetheless. And somewhere across town, in a federal prison, Damian Mercer sat in a cell paying the price for crimes he'd thought would never catch up with him. But Serena wasn't thinking about him anymore. She was thinking about futures and foundations, and the man whose hand fit perfectly in hers, whose scars matched her own, whose choice to see her when she was invisible had changed everything. Ready to go home? Lucian asked. Serena looked at him. This man who'd saved her life by teaching her to save herself, who'd given her freedom and then space to use it, who'd chosen her every day in small, deliberate ways that added up to love. Yes, she said, let's go home. And they did, together.